So, our story kicks off with our main dude, Kion, grinding non-stop, pushing his body and spirit to the absolute limit. Day after day, he throws himself into brutal training sessions, sharpening his fighting skills, forcing his muscles to burn with endless workouts. His whole life turned into this never-ending cycle of pain and discipline. Kion ditched the regular 9 to 5, gave up normal life just to focus everything on leveling himself up. But the real question is, why? Why sacrifice so much? What's he chasing? Only Kion knows. He's prepping himself for the inevitable, the apocalypse creeping closer every damn day. 15 days ago, the entire world shook when the news dropped. Monsters are invading Earth. Fear spread through the city, but so did doubt. A lot of people refused to believe it, brushing it off as another hoax or some stupid prank. That disbelief, it cost lives. One by one, the non-believers started dropping. Kion, tired of the world, just walked in silence, lost in his own head. Do those so-called monsters even exist? His phone buzzed with breaking news, reports of the first monster attacks flashing across the screen. But as long as it didn't touch him personally, he didn't care. Humanity already had enough pain and injustice, right? And yet, his doubt shattered in an instant. Right there, in the middle of the street, something totally not from this world was just lying there. Kion froze, shocked out of his mind. The creature looked straight out of a nightmare, twisting and writhing on the ground. Anyone else would have bolted the second they saw it. But despite its freaky appearance, it wasn't attacking. It just lay there, helpless, drained, almost pitiful. Kion hesitated. In front of him was a monster, and the last thing he wanted was to help it. Yet, in its eyes, he saw weakness, a longing for home, for family, something it might never see again. Kion struggled with the choice, but in the end, he freed the monster. The creature looked at him with gratitude and handed him something strange. It was called the Silver Goblin Pill. Cautiously, he took it, and suddenly, a blinding notification flashed before his eyes. The system had activated. Back home, Kishian sat for hours, staring at the mysterious pill that monster had left him. Holding it in his hands, he realized this was no small decision. This one choice could change his entire future. Meanwhile, the news was going wild. Massive towers were sprouting all across the globe. Before Kion could even process it, a blinding explosion shook the air. And right outside his window, in that exact moment, one of those towers rose, towering into the sky. It appeared out of nowhere, like reality itself just cracked. A massive ominous structure erupted from the underground, shaking the earth to its core. The monsters, the strange towers, all of it pointed to one thing: the end of the world had begun. Kion had always been the type to think things through, but maybe it was time for a reckless move. Instantly, the system granted him a Sage's Status window, a guide holding the best shot at survival. And right before his eyes, a book materialized, huge, glowing with an unnatural light. Without a second thought, he grabbed it. Every touch of that book felt like it could rewrite the world itself. The system issued a warning. Apocalypse was here, and above all, combat skills were key. Kion threw himself into training once more. As the countdown ticked toward 0, Kion could feel the world around him shifting. Suddenly, he found himself in a forest. Not a single soul in sight. This wasn't the end of the world he imagined. Beside him lay a flaming sword. The second he touched it, the system announced the start of his training. His skills were determined, and his class revealed the one that suited him best: Combat Swordsman. The system menu laid it all out. Name, level, health, mana, every stat clear before his eyes. His very first mission from the system: survive 60 minutes in the forest or find a way out. The guide whispered a warning. If he wanted to grow stronger, he had to kill as many monsters as possible. Running away wouldn't help him evolve. And just like that, the training began. A cute little creature popped up in front of Kion, a one-horned raccoon, level 1. But Kion had already learned, never trust appearances. In the blink of an eye, that harmless critter lunged at him, vicious and deadly. Without even thinking, Kion struck it down in a split second. One clean hit. The system reminded him his mana could only handle 5 skill uses. If he wanted to survive, he needed to get stronger. Then the creatures came at him non-stop, but Kion cut them down one after another, relentless. With every kill, his stats climbed higher. Each time he leveled up, he gained points to boost his attributes. But the moment he hit level 2, the system suddenly dropped him back down to level 1. It explained that because of his sage status, his growth would be slower than everyone else's. Kyan didn't like that one bit. Was this punishment for his choice? A wave of unfairness washed over him. But then, checking the menu, he noticed his stats had gone up, yet his points stayed the same. That's when it hit him. The guide wasn't just some bug. It was a glitch in the system working in his favor. This wasn't punishment. It was a chance. The system itself could become his strongest ally. All he had to do was keep pushing forward. Our hero went wild, cutting down creatures one after another, non-stop. With each kill, Kyan gained experience, leveling up again and again. But just as he expected, the glitch kicked in. His level reset back to 1, yet his points stayed intact, which meant he had the easiest path to stacking up his stats. Kyan had 4 main attributes: endurance, strength, perception, and agility. As a combat swordsman, the obvious choice would be to boost strength and agility. Strength made his strikes hit harder, while agility let him react way faster. But right now, he had one mission: survive 60 minutes alone in the forest. So instead, Kyan chose to boost his sensitivity. He easily took down the one-horned raccoon, but that wasn't nearly enough, not even for training, let alone leveling up. With his sensitivity enhanced, Kyan uncovered new ways to hunt. It felt like our hero could even sense the power of others now, thanks to his boosted sensitivity. Suddenly, a notification popped up. Hidden quest activated. Take down the level 2 alpha raccoon. Kyan hadn't expected to see this massive beast, with a long, razor-sharp horn, and claws just as long, way bigger than those cat-sized critters he'd been dealing with. Before Kyan could even react, the monster charged straight at him. Thanks to his agility, he managed to dodge at the last second. The beast slammed into a tree like a raging rhino, punching a hole right through the spot Kyan had just been standing. He realized instantly, this one wasn't like the smaller ones. But for Kyan, that didn't matter. The creature made one final leap, the last one of its life. With a single powerful strike, Kyan cut it down, ending the fight in an instant. That marked the final training task, and he had cleared it. The first stage of his journey was complete. Closing his eyes, the boy allowed himself a brief moment of rest. But when he opened them again, the forest was gone. Everything around him had changed. Instead of trees, he now saw a crowd of confused people. Shock filled their eyes, just like his own. Then, a loudspeaker blared with an announcement. The announcement boomed, telling them all they had successfully cleared their training. Now, they were standing in the lobby of the tower. Kyan quickly scanned the room. 14 men, 11 women. Everyone looked like they'd been through the same brutal fight as him. As the announcer's voice faded, panic broke out across the hall. The world had changed in an instant. But not for our hero. He already knew the end of the world was coming. A girl nearby asked where they were. Someone from the crowd shouted back. It was the Tower of the Apocalypse. And then, right in the middle of the group, a small rabbit appeared. Kum, the manager of the first floor, level 55, boldly calling himself the Tower's cutie. His arrival sparked a storm of questions. People were on the verge of swarming him, desperate for answers. Yet Kum stayed calm, completely unfazed, like he'd seen this reaction countless times before. Even Kyan stepped forward, asking whether this really was the end of the world, or if they were supposed to do something. The rabbit actually chose to answer him. At first it smiled innocently, but then its expression twisted in an instant. The cute face warped into a terrifying grin, sending chills down everyone's spines. The creature declared the start of the game, a game where death itself hung over every player. Every human on Earth was now inside a tower. To survive, they had to stick together and climb higher. Kyan guessed that if they could reach the very top, maybe they'd be able to return to their normal lives. But Kum had no answer for that. To him, chasing meaning in the climb was pointless. What he did explain was simple. Only those who climbed had a chance to live, stay at the bottom, and death was guaranteed. Kum revealed that countless people had already died during the training stage. It was supposed to be just survival instructions, and yet so many couldn't even get past that. Then, out of nowhere, Kum asked if anyone wanted to kill him. The question shocked the entire room. Kyan figured it had to be a trap. The rabbit looked weak, but his level, 55, told a different story. He wanted to step back, stay out of it, but the system ordered him to help the first floor manager. That meant he actually had a chance to attack the rabbit. The system had never steered him wrong before, But this mission felt way too suspicious. While Kion hesitated, one volunteer stepped forward. The man grinned, thrilled at the thought of finally striking down the rabbit. In a flash, he lunged at Kumkum, but Kumkum swatted him aside with a single, devastating blow. His form suddenly shifted, massive, intimidating, a true monster revealing its real strength. Everyone froze in terror as Kumkum counterattacked, killing the man with another brutal strike. The cute little rabbit had transformed into a muscle-bound killer. Now everyone understood what they were really dealing with. Panic erupted, people scattering in fear, realizing just how serious this was. And Kion, he knew it could have been him lying dead if he had stepped up earlier. Yet, the mission still loomed over him. Meanwhile, the cutie slipped back into its innocent look, almost mocking them, waiting for new volunteers. Kion began to doubt. Had the system made a mistake? Or worse, was this a trap meant to get him killed? That tiny creature stood in a pool of blood, smiling, waiting for the next fight. Or their death. Could the system really be wrong? Or even scarier, had it lied to him on purpose? The thought gnawed at Kion. Suddenly, the system cut through his doubts with a new alert. The sage's status had fully activated, and in that moment, Kion understood everything. The activation gave him access to the guide and, more importantly, the ability to see the status windows of others. But why now? Why did the system unlock the eye of the sage at this exact moment? His gaze locked on Kumkum, and suddenly everything clicked into place. Kion raised his hand, calm and confident. Instantly all eyes were on him. He was the next volunteer, a choice so bold everyone knew it was basically suicide. The cutie was shocked. This kid, level 1, stepping up to face him? But Kion's hand was already on his sword. No fear in his eyes, only sheer determination. A blonde girl rushed forward, tears in her eyes, begging him not to do it. Others joined her, trying to stop him, but Kion stood firm. He wasn't acting recklessly. He had a plan. The rabbit, or rather, the beast, lunged at him, expecting Kion to fall like the last guy. But Kion's confidence came from a brilliant realization. Earlier, Kumkum said there were 24 people in the room, but Kion had counted 25. Turns out, Kumkum wasn't wrong. There really were only 24, the corpse on the ground. Just a hologram created by Kumkum. Kion had figured it out using the Eye of the Sage. He checked the status of the so-called dead man, and nothing showed up. All that fear for their lives, the terror of facing a monster with such a high level. It wasn't without reason. Kion had seen it. Despite Kumkum's insane level, all his stats were 0. The rabbit wasn't real at all, just a hologram that would disappear the moment it took damage. Our hero was faster and stronger than Kumkum, so dodging the attack was effortless. With one decisive strike, Kion delivered the finishing blow. The cutie, or rather the hologram, smiled and wished good luck to all the brave ones. Kion turned, expecting to see Kumkum's body on the ground, but instead, what remained was a glowing orb. Inside it, a single stat point. The crowd erupted, demanding to know how he'd figured it out. But Kion wasn't about to reveal his secret. He simply said that when the fake blood splashed toward Jane, she should have been covered, but she stayed completely clean. A burly man stepped up, accusing Kion of making a huge mistake. Leo, a level 4 player, full of arrogance, scoffed, claiming Kion was nothing but a lucky fluke. Kion disagreed, but Leo kept pushing, mocking him, calling him a coward for still being level 1 after everything. The arrogant brute made it clear. He wanted to snatch that single stat point for himself. But Kion wasn't Mother Teresa. Cold-blooded, he claimed the point for himself, not about to give it up to anyone. Leo lost it. Furious, he swore he'd hunt Kion down until he quit the game for good. Then, suddenly, the loudspeakers blared again. An announcement about gold, currency that could be spent in the shop. Extra gold was being awarded based on the monsters killed during training. And the announcer dropped a bomb. There was one player in the zone holding a massive total of 7,400 gold. Some players whined about not hunted enough, while others admired whoever had pulled off such an insane result. But there were 3 main ways to spend gold: buying items, upgrading skills, and boosting stats. Our hero chose the strategic path. He raised all his stats evenly to 20, building a solid foundation. Watching the others, he noticed how many of them spent their gold recklessly, guided by impulse instead of logic. Realizing his sports outfit wasn't fit for battle, Kion bought himself proper combat gear, crafted for survival. Once finished shopping, he ran into the same blonde girl. She looked a little unsure of herself and asked for advice. Jane, a level 3 healer, admitted she had been impressed by his courage and confidence despite still being level 1. Kyan could already see her stats through the eye of the sage, but he asked anyway, how much gold did she have? Since she was honest, he advised her to invest in endurance, explaining that for her, it was the key to survival. Jane trusted him, thanked him sincerely for the advice, and promised she would follow it. The loudspeaker announced that a new task would begin soon. The rules were clear. Players had to form groups of 3. Anyone left unpaired would be assigned randomly. They had 30 minutes. River, a level 4 player, suggested everyone reveal their classes first. Following his lead, people began forming groups, choosing teammates based on class and level. Jane asked Kyan to be her partner, and he had no objections. Having a healer in the party was always a blessing, but the others avoided him. To them, a level 1 swordsman wasn't a valuable or reliable ally. Time ran out. All groups were formed, and Kyan's only confirmed partner was Jane. The mission began, and maybe, just maybe, the groups were built on one cruel rule: pair those who despised each other most. If that was true, then it explained perfectly why Leo ended up in Kyan's group. Why would a level 4 pro end up without a team? Did everyone seriously ditch him? Kyan hesitated for a sec, but in the tower, pride didn't mean squat. He was already figuring out how to flip this to his advantage. Their first mission as a squad was clear: take down a pack of kobolds in 12 hours. Leo instantly acted like the boss, telling everyone to stay out of it while he handled the monsters himself. Kyan was about to speak up about teamwork, but Leo cut him off, saying he'd do all the work anyway. So, Kyan stayed quiet, just watching how it would play out. To Leo, someone like Kyan had no business being brave. He'd just end up dead fast. Jane wasn't like Leo, though. She actually worried about the group's survival. 3 totally different people forced into one team. Could they even pull this mission off? Around them, fruit trees grew wild, bugs buzzing everywhere, swarms of annoying insects filling the air. Looking around, Kyan realized they must have been dropped somewhere in the mountains. Jane wasn't sure they'd be able to handle a mission like this. But Kyan reassured her. If this was still the beginner's level, then they could handle it. And right then, something terrifying appeared in front of them. Huge claws, a body packed with muscle, radiating raw power. A level 5 beast, wolf-like but way tougher, nothing like that raccoon from before. Kyan and Jane held their breath, trying to think of a plan. They wanted to scout the area first, to make sure no other monsters were nearby. But Leo didn't wait. He charged straight at the kobold, yelling like a maniac. He threw a heavy punch right into its face, sure it would be an easy win. The others froze. Nobody expected such reckless, almost stupid bravery. That stunt could straight up cost Leo his life. The beast snarled, flashing its razor-sharp fangs, ready to tear him apart. But Leo didn't even think about backing off, answering with the same wild fury. Kyan knew the guy was stubborn, but picking a solo fight like that was insane. Jane rushed in to support him, using her healing powers and boosting his skills. Luckily, Kyan didn't sense any other monsters nearby. It's giving them at least a slim chance. Still, he noticed Leo's attacks were barely scratching the thing, so he pulled out his guide for answers. Turns out, kobolds were passive creatures. They wouldn't strike first unless threatened, meaning Leo had just poked a hornet's nest and brought this disaster on himself. Kyan flipped through the guide in a panic, searching for anything useful. Finally, he stumbled on something important. The redhead kept fighting with everything he had, activating his skill Stone Fist. But instead of finishing the kobold in one blow, he ended up drawing the attention of another one, something even worse. A level 6 kobold, faster, stronger, with a vicious snarl. Now the 2 monsters attacked together, doubling the pressure. Leo was barely staying on his feet, fighting desperately, hoping Kyan would step in. His eyes darted around, for a split second suspecting their teammate had bailed. The fight was breaking him. His body was reaching its limit. And suddenly, Jane, clutching her sword with trembling hands, charged recklessly at one of the kobolds. But she had no real combat skills. Her strike was more a desperate gesture than an attack. The girl had already resigned herself to death, gripping the blade tightly as if in farewell. Yet in that moment, the hero appeared from behind, his poison blade slashing into the monster. He unleashed his sword mastery, forcing the venom to spread faster through its body. The beast howled in agony as festering boils began to cover its flesh. Its head, struck directly by Kion, suffered the most. And then, without warning, it exploded like a bomb. The level 6 kobold let out a dying gasp and collapsed, lifeless. Leo froze in shock. He hadn't expected the tide to turn so quickly. Jane, on the other hand, couldn't hide her joy. The boy had just saved her life. As it turned out, the poison Kion had used came from the strange fruits of the trees they had passed earlier. While the bugs swarmed everything around them, those fruits were left untouched. The system revealed that this toxin was lethal against kobolds. Using his guide, Kion could summon these poisoned apples straight into his hands. In other words, the key to clearing the first mission had been with him from the start. Kion helped Jane back to her feet, and she thanked him sincerely for saving her. But Leo wasn't pleased with the hero's sudden reappearance. To him, it looked like Kion had just been hiding in the bushes while they fought. The redhead shouted that Kion had stolen his victory, claiming he had been the true fighter. He simply couldn't accept that a level 1 rookie had taken down the monster while he had failed. The sun dipped slowly behind the horizon as the group finally reached the kobold settlement. Strong and relentless, Leo butchered his enemies with brute force. He burned through nearly all his stamina in the endless savage battle. His body was covered in deep wounds, the beasts striking back just as fiercely. Yet, despite the pain and exhaustion, giving up never even crossed his mind. Meanwhile, Jane and Kion calmly cut down the monsters, swift and efficient with every move. The redhead fought desperately in the middle of the horde, while those two hadn't even broken a sweat. Blow after blow landed on him, and he couldn't keep up with his defenses. His legs finally gave out. He collapsed to the ground, drained and broken. He realized then that he couldn't possibly take down the entire pack alone, no matter how much he had believed he could. Leo lay trembling on the ground, his voice cracking into a pitiful plea for help. He closed his eyes, bracing himself for what he thought would be his final strike. But when he opened them, he saw kobold heads exploding one after another. Standing over him was Kion, calm and composed, reaching out his hand. Leo had never in his life been so relieved to see this boy. The mission was complete, and with it, the tension between Leo and King Chin seemed to fade. The trio returned together through the portal, back into the lobby. The flood of emotions Leo had felt moments earlier slowly subsided, and he soon regretted how overly grateful he had been to a mere level 2 player, even speaking to him with respect. Jane and Leo both leveled up by 4, while Kayan had only reached level 2. The redhead was frustrated by the situation, but as a man of his word, he couldn't go back on his promise. Every emotion flickered across his face, making his behavior look strange to the others. It turned out their team had completed the mission faster than anyone else. Kian thought it was just dumb luck. Jane, however, completely disagreed. In her eyes, no one but him could have found a way out of that mess. He accepted the praise with a smile, though deep inside he felt like a fraud for lying about the guide. Soon, other groups began returning. Maybe they weren't the only ones who cheated and used the poisoned apples. But not everyone had made it out so easily. Many had lost their lives. Another group emerged from the portal, but only 2 remained alive. Kobolds were merciless and brutally strong creatures. From the loudspeaker came the announcement that the mission was over. All 6 groups had returned, but 8 out of the 24 fighters hadn't survived. They were dead. The mission had been tough, and it was expected that not everyone would make it, but 8 casualties. That no one had seen coming. How many more lives would be snuffed out before they finally reached the top floor? The reward distribution for clearing the first mission began. Those groups that hadn't lost a single member. And the group that arrived first, each would receive 1,000 gold. Our trio snagged the reward twice, stacking up the bonus. Kion decided to save as much as possible. Gold would be his lifeline, his insurance. Everyone grew curious, wanting to know who had claimed first place. This time, Kion couldn't hide the truth. River's team had come in second and had seen them. But just as he opened his mouth to explain, Leo stepped forward and proudly declared that it had been them. Shock rippled through the crowd. A team made of a healer, a low-level newbie, and a reckless hothead had taken first place. Kian hoped the attention would drift away from him. But people still kept asking how a level 2 player could end up leading the pack. Whispers broke out. Maybe the kid hadn't done anything. Maybe the reward wasn't fair at all. The blonde wanted to step up for him, already starting to defend his name. But Kaon stopped her. Nobody would listen anyway. Then River, an 8th level archer and one of the region's finest, cut through the noise. He declared that what really mattered was survival. Liam, another level 8 fighter and one of the strongest swordsmen around, backed him up. That sparked an idea. If they wanted to reach the summit, they'd have to move forward together, side by side, in memory of all those who had fallen. The hall erupted with noise, until the flames around them suddenly turned blood red. Silence fell. The loudspeaker boomed once again, announcing a warning. Due to the low survival rate in this region, a penalty mission was being issued. Not just difficult, deadly. Terror froze across everyone's faces. The mission demanded they choose one player to be sent to certain death. They had 5 minutes. If no one was chosen, the system would auto-vote and sacrifice them all. In that moment, they realized, within 5 minutes, they'd have to pick a future corpse. All those people who had just been shouting about unity and trust now had to decide who would be left to die fighting alone. Time ticked down. Jane suggested they all vote for themselves, so that no one would have to face the mission. But no one was sure it would work. What if that just doomed them all to the deadly challenge? The 5 minutes flew by, and desperation set in. They had to choose. And then one of the players pointed his finger straight at our main character. The weakest one in the room, the lowest level among them all. Liam hesitated. Wasn't this too cruel? But he had no choice. It was him or someone else. Honestly, it was expected. With the way most players looked at Kion, nobody was about to throw their own life away. Jane begged them to stop this madness, but Kion silenced her. Her plan wasn't guaranteed to work anyway. Trust had already been shattered. The mass vote turned against Kion. People were simply too scared for their own skins. Still, in his mind, the real reason was obvious. It was his low level. In that moment, everyone revealed their true colors. People who thought only of themselves. People who despised the weak. They had forgotten what it meant to protect those who needed help. And in the final moment, even Leo, the man whose life Kion had saved, voted against him. The portal to the deadly mission ripped open. And yet, people still couldn't believe this was truly happening. Jane was the only one whose heart genuinely ached for the boy. Leo, on the other hand, thought he had finally gotten rid of his greatest rival. The sacrifice had been chosen. It was time to walk his own Golgotha. Behind Kion, the faces of the crowd were a mix of guilt and relief. But Kion remained ice cold, unmoved. The guide had told him to clear the deadly mission. And for him, this wouldn't mean death and suffering. It meant victory and rewards beyond imagination. The moment he vanished into the portal, silence fell over the lobby like a shroud. Jane and Leo sat in silence, lost in thought, when a man approached them. He offered his condolences. Even though they hadn't known Kion for long, fighting for their lives together had created a bond. But Leo felt no guilt, no regret. To him, Kion had simply gotten what he deserved. He went on, claiming that a low-level player like that had only tried to leech off his fame. Jane, sitting right beside him, could hardly believe her ears. She knew the truth, that it was Kion's abilities that had saved them all. Yet Leo ranted, shouting about luck and how the kid just knew how to show up at the last moment. That's when the blonde snapped, reminding him sharply of who had actually saved his life. The memories hit Leo hard, forcing him to wonder, could someone with those kinds of abilities really be hiding his true level? River kept his eyes locked on the spot where the portal had been, silently hoping Kion could survive the impossible trial. Jane, barely holding back tears, whispered that she believed in him, though maybe she just was trying to convince herself. River backed her up, not letting doubt poison the air. Meanwhile, our hero found himself in the kobold settlement once again. But this time, it was different. Darker, emptier, way more sinister. Kion was low-key ready to cast a vote for himself. But then an entire uprising lit up in his name. Fury boiled inside him at Leo's betrayal, and he needed a way to vent it. Then the system's notification hit him. The kobolds were returning. Only this time, they weren't just aggressive, they were furious, seething with rage. At the rear of the horde, their leader appeared, a level 12 kobold chief, towering and terrifying. The mission was clear. Wipe them all out, not a single one left breathing. The tribe's chieftain was the dungeon boss. And so, Kion now stood alone against the entire pack and their strongest warrior. Sword in hand, its blade coated with lethal poison, he braced himself. The monsters rushed him in waves, giving him no time to breathe. But Kion wasn't just fast, he was far stronger than they expected. Activating his basic sword mastery, the brutal clash began. Kobolds dropped one after another, never even realizing what killed them, until only one remained, the chief, his ultimate trial. The battle was fierce, raw power against raw power. Two warriors face to face, no room for weakness. And as it turned out, Keion wasn't the only one with superhuman strength. The monster's high level gave it terrifying abilities. The kobold minimized damage, dodging with inhuman skill. Then, to Keion's shock, the chief suddenly turned and ran. A boss monster, running like a coward? It's pathetic. Keion prepared to end it in one decisive strike, ready to finish this battle clean. But in that instant, the kobold's skin hardened, morphing into natural armor. Instead of a killing blow, Keion barely scratched it. Overhead, a blood-red moon appeared, staining the entire battlefield crimson. The beast's wolf-like eyes blazed scarlet, signaling the birth of true terror. With a feral roar, the monster turned and unleashed a devastating strike. Would our hero survive, or fall here, in the heart of the dungeon? Meanwhile, inside the tower, Leo kicked off his little propaganda campaign, declaring himself the chosen one, the leader who'd guide everyone to the top. But honestly, almost nobody was buying into his hype. Jane kept praying for our hero, while the redhead just sneered at the sight. The blonde couldn't stand his arrogance anymore and tried to shut him down. Their bickering escalated into a full-on shouting match, drawing everyone's attention. Jane shot him a sharp question. What would he say if Keion actually survived and came back? But before Leo could spit out another excuse, the portal suddenly lit up. And from it stepped the one they had already buried in their minds. Our hero, Keion, returned, with a massive open wound carved across his chest. He stood tall. Turned out, the kobold boss's strength skyrockets whenever his eyes turned blood red. The beast nearly tore Keion apart. He had to hit back with something way stronger than before. Just one strike. That's all it would take to change everything. But there was no time to hesitate. Death was already breathing down his neck. Every blow from the monster hit like a wrecking ball. In that chaos, Keion came up with a plan. Forget small cuts. Go for a single, piercing strike. He had to gather everything he had and unleash it in one devastating blow. A sword isn't meant to scratch. It's meant to kill. One chance. That's all he had. He would take the beast's momentum, add his own weight, and strike with everything on the line. It was do or die, his life or the monster's. And then, his blade tore straight through, punching a massive fatal hole in the kobold's chest. Damn, he did it. It worked. And as a reward, Keion unlocked a new skill, piercing strike. Jane, ignoring everyone else, ran toward him with tears in her eyes, ready to throw her arms around him. But out of nowhere, Leo's massive body shoved her to the ground. She tumbled across the floor from the sheer force of it. Keion was stunned. What the hell was Leo doing, acting like this? The redhead roared across the hall, claiming he always believed in Keion, that he knew he'd survive and overcome every trial. But the truth was obvious. There wasn't a shred of sincerity in his words, and Keion knew it better than anyone. Keion's return unleashed a storm of questions from the others. They couldn't understand. Why had he slain the boss, yet gained no level up? Doubt began to creep in. What if his mission was a trick, like that case with Kumkum? Maybe he was just an absurdly lucky trickster. Keion's suspicions were confirmed. People always want the weak to remain weak. Since childhood, he had been mocked by anyone who felt like it. Nobody believed that a worthless orphan could ever accomplish anything on his own. While Keion remained cold and silent, the players around him built theories of how he had cheated death. He needed to take control of the situation, to shift their focus away from him. Suddenly, Jane spoke up in his defense. For her, it was unthinkable to doubt someone's strength when he had literally fought death and won. Keion was quietly moved by her determination. Even Leo joined in to support him, but his motives were more selfish than sincere. No one understood this performance, but no one dared to oppose the giant man either. Still, his goal was always to preserve as many lives as possible. To calm suspicions, he decided to reveal something. When he drew out the sword he had earned as a reward, every jaw in the hall dropped. A rare weapon, boosting attack by plus 115%. Any swordsman would have killed for such a treasure. River, sharp as always, noticed the poison Keion had used on the apples, but Keion brushed it off, calling it mere luck. The archer defended him, reminding the others that this reward was far more valuable than a few scraps of survival experience. But Keion corrected them. This wasn't about survival. He had literally been running from death itself, and the blame lay with everyone present. Liam finally cracked under the weight of those words and admitted Keion was right. He stopped making excuses and confessed to everyone, and to himself, that his vote had been selfish. To vote for the lowest level player was never survival strategy. It was exile, and they all knew it. Liam bowed his head and apologized sincerely for throwing him to danger like a stray pup. Yet he was truly grateful that Kion had made it back alive. But not everyone shared Liam's guilt. A girl from the crowd coldly remarked that someone had to go, and Kion had even returned with loot. The two of them clashed in argument. He spoke of guilt and conscience while she scoffed, telling him to stop the circus, reminding him that he was the first to cast his vote. Kion silenced the foolish quarrel. His words weren't meant to shame them, but to end the pointless conflict. This deadly vote wasn't about killing the weakest. It was the tower's way of dividing them. The tower thrived on sowing distrust, provoking conflict and discord among its challengers, and it delighted in sending them down the path of ruin. Kaon's return, however, became proof that their actions could defy the tower's will. River asked if he had a plan. Kion vowed to seek every possible way not only to survive, but to ascend the tower itself. Higher and higher they would climb. With pure hope in his eyes, the hero looked upward, believing that all of them might one day reclaim their former lives. His words ignited a spark, the spirit of victory, the will to fight for happiness. Jane added her voice, urging everyone to unite for success. Even Liam was inspired, realizing at last that one's level alone never defined their worth. And then, out of nowhere, their manager appeared once again, the sly trickster, Kum Kum. He announced a new challenge. This was a survival game, not a vacation. His sudden appearance drew a storm of questions. How had he returned? Why was he here again? Would he hand out stat points? Gayan, however, already guessed the nature of the trial. The second-level mission would take place here, among the remaining 16 players. Its name, Royal Battle. Kum Kum smiled, saying that since they were still low level, the trial wouldn't be too difficult. But by now, none of them trusted the rabbit's words. The rules. Each of the 16 players would face their own duplicate, 32 bodies in a single room. Their task, eliminate the doppelgangers. But the clones carried not only identical stats, but identical memories, making the battle infinitely more brutal. The cruelest rule of all, killing one's clone yielded nothing. Only by killing another player could one earn gold and stat points. In other words, the tower demanded they slaughter each other for the chance at reward. And if 30 minutes passed without a single death, all players would be forcibly summoned to the lobby and face an unspeakable catastrophe. Without warning, a portal tore open in the center of the hall, and something monstrous began to crawl out. Panic spread like wildfire as players fled from the inhuman hand that emerged. From the portal rose a beast of unknown level, towering like a skyscraper. Just one glance at its form was enough to make one wish to hide under a blanket and pray it was only a nightmare. Did the tower truly expect this handful of players to fight that? A thunderous shockwave ripped through the hall, shattering everything in its path and flinging bodies like helpless puppets. Kayan threw himself to the ground with Jane and Liam, narrowly avoiding the rain of debris. That colossal monstrosity was catastrophe-made flesh. The players had expected something grand, but not this, and certainly not on the second floor. Panic erupted, hysteria swept through the hall, shock paralyzed their minds. It was time, the moment for the hero to seize control. Using his high agility, Kayan darted forward, saving a boy frozen in terror before the beast. The mission hadn't even begun, yet the apocalypse had already descended upon them. Kum Kum cackled like a madman, reveling in the spectacle. Kayan recalled the rabbit's words about catastrophe, and a spark of brilliance flashed in his mind. Perhaps this was all a demonstration of power. The monster, the destruction, it was all an illusion, incapable of inflicting true harm. Those who did not falter rushed in to fight, striking the beast with desperate resolve. Yet their efforts were meaningless. The creature showed no sign of pain, no hint of damage. Watching them, even Kion began to doubt. Was this truly just a show? Jane's mana, the lifeline of their healer, was nearly drained. There were no casualties yet, but it was only a matter of time. A new wave of the monster's devastating force gathered, ready to crash upon them. Kion shouted for everyone to retreat, to escape the shockwave, yet he himself refused to move. Liam tried to pull him back, but the hero's resolve was unshakable. Only he could bring this monster down. If he combined his piercing strike with the indomitable blade, perhaps, just perhaps, energy flared across Kion's sword, visible to all as the beast's colossal fist closed in. It would be either his death or the triumph of his gambit. There was no third path. A blinding flash tore through the hall. When the light faded, Kion stood firm. His strike had pierced the monster's arm, leaving a gaping void. And then, impossibly, the behemoth began to dissolve into nothingness, vanishing as if it had never existed. Silence reigned. Faces were frozen in shock, eyes wide, mouths agape. Even the hero himself was speechless. Then the tension shattered, replaced by a chorus of unrestrained cheers. Even Kion had never imagined such power hidden within his blade, but he felt something had changed inside him. Opening his guide, he was unprepared for what awaited. He had exceeded his limits. His body was now bound by exhaustion, 3 minutes of complete powerlessness. His strength failed him. Collapsing, the world blurred before his eyes. Darkness closed in, and consciousness slipped away. The system's voice rang out, strength restored. It was like a surge of pure adrenaline rushing through Kion's veins. Players gathered around him, but his gaze was hollow, his mind still lost in the storm of what had just transpired. Liam, standing closest, was moved to the core. None could believe the boy had hidden such overwhelming might. Yet Kion ignored all words, all stares. His only concern was the truth behind the so-called catastrophe. And then, the tower's smiling manager revealed it himself. It had been nothing but a display of power. The monstrosity was sent back through the void. With playful mockery, the rabbit boasted how close they had all been to death, praising the pleasant atmosphere it had created. The players turned their gazes upon him, some with dread, others with unmasked hatred. And then came the reminder, every 30 minutes, someone must die. With innocent eyes, he spoke the cruelest words. Perhaps their killers already stood among them. Terror surged as the players began to eye each other with suspicion. Did they not realize this was yet another trick to tear them apart? The floor manager's duty complete, Kum vanished into his portal. All stared at the spot he had stood, but none knew what awaited them next. In the vestibule, a storm of debate erupted. Ideas clashed on how to distinguish real from clone. Yet the task seemed impossible. The doubles shared not just appearances, but memories as well. Then Kion silenced them all, declaring he held the answer. He proclaimed that he alone would participate in this mission. Shock rippled through the group. Disbelief was written on every face. Kion commanded that all gather at the highest point. If anyone acted out of line, they would be deemed a double. Not everyone welcomed the plan. Dean, the level 8 soldier, was openly displeased. A girl who once doubted his strength admitted his power, yet could not see why all should obey him. But Kion reminded them of the rabbit's words, though named a battle with doubles. In truth, the tower wanted them to slaughter one another. He refused to play by such rules and offered the only path he saw as victory. Though some still opposed, River lent his support to the idea. Yet the archer pressed further. If Kion alone would fight, did that mean he could truly discern the fakes? The hero's answer was resolute, yes. And so, the system's chime rang. The mission of the second floor had begun. Kill within 30 minutes, or face annihilation. Leo kept moving forward, mumbling under his breath. And he wasn't about to take orders from anybody. Hearing footsteps, the red-haired warrior slipped behind a tree, heart racing. Was it a double approaching? But no, it was Kion, smiling mischievously. He had only played a trick. How a giant like him managed to hide behind that tiny tree, none could fathom. Relief washed over Leo. Better to see his true friend than face the terror of a false one. Without warning, our hero cleaved a man cleanly in half, his blade slicing through him as easily as soft tofu. Kion gripped his sword with unshakable confidence, ending his comrade's life in mere seconds. His expression bore only merciless resolve. Yet, if one rewound time, it was clear. The hero had prepared meticulously for this battle, to the point of paranoia. He knew he could distinguish doubles from the real, yet he still feared what might go wrong. Kion had poured mountains of gold into sharpening his sensitivity. He became the first player to attain absolute sense, raising his perception to its ultimate peak. Every one of his 5 senses was perfected, heightened to 100%. He could detect and identify beings within a wide radius. Focusing, he heard faint muttering. The voice, familiar. Using his flawless vision, he spotted the figure. It was Leo's silhouette. Though half a kilometer away, it felt as if the red-haired warrior was right beside him. And then came the scent. His sense of smell was no less refined. A revolting stench clawed at his receptors, nearly driving them mad. Tracking the source, Kaon realized, it was the red-haired warrior's foul double. Even though Leo pretended flawlessly till the end, the hero had seen through him from the very start. Casting his gaze toward where the real players should be, Kaon hoped his plan would hold. Thanks to River's support, they had reached a fragile consensus, but the future remained uncertain. In theory, nothing should happen as long as they stayed atop the peak. Suddenly, the system announced a real player had been killed. Kaon hadn't expected it, at least not so soon. Panic flooded his mind. Who was the culprit? A player or one of the doubles? The truth was impossible to grasp. The hero sprinted with all his speed, determined to uncover the truth. But as he battled yet another clone, another player fell. His sharpened senses caught a horrific sight, a player slaying another. Yet, instead of a man, Kaon saw the form of a cunning double. Without hesitation, he hurled himself into the fight. For a fleeting moment, it could have been mistaken for an innocent human being. But Kaon did not falter. His blade split the double in two, without mercy. For an instant, he thought it was his own clone, but it's someone else. Fortunate he had discovered it so soon. Luke, a level 4 player, fell, his death cruel and senseless. As Kaon examined the corpse, he noticed something that should not have been there. The weapon of Den's double was a long, ancient blade. Yet the wound carved across the dead man's face was not made by that weapon, but by something smaller, sharper. Like an arrow of River's, one that was now aimed directly at the hero. From behind a tree, and at such a distance, Kaon could not discern whether it was the real River or his clone. But then he saw it, an arrow lodged in River's back. Had a double struck him, or had he inflicted the wound himself? The hero stepped out of cover, demanding to know if the archer was all right. River, unwilling to risk it, kept him at range. He could not distinguish doubles from men. Kaon's answer was cold. He had just slain a clone. Was that proof enough? Doubt melted away. Relief flickered across the archer's face. But before he could finish warning Kaon to beware his own double, a scream of pain tore from his throat. River collapsed, unresponsive, and the hero hurled himself to his side. Dragging him toward safety, they encountered Jane the healer. But why was she here when she should have been secured? That was when Kaon's sharpened senses revealed what River could not, their true nature as doubles. At first glance, it was only Jane and Liam side by side. Yet Kaon saw through them instantly, exposed their counterfeit shells. The two lunged, attacking Kaon and the wounded archer. Liam's blade clashed with the hero's. Kaon's strikes radiated iron certainty, while the clone exuded nothing but arrogant malice. Jane, meanwhile, hurled herself at the half-conscious River. For a moment, Kaon wondered, why reveal themselves so brazenly? Others had acted to the very end. Jane knew Kaon's power better than most, so why rush headlong into certain death? Then he turned, only to find the blonde charging him with a sword. At the same instant, Liam struck from the other side. But where was River, with his bow and arrows? Reflexes saved him. Kaon dodged, leaping back just in time. And in that instant, he understood the truth. An arrow tore into the tree beside him, grazing his cheek. It had been aimed at him all along. From the side came mocking laughter, and Kaon froze at the sound. River grinned, a twisted, psychotic smile, as he leveled an arrow straight at Kaon's face. Now the truth was clear. This was why the doubles had revealed themselves so quickly, why the battle had erupted at once. They had sensed their advantage. The archer was no double. He was the real one, a true madman, thirsting for the hero's blood. He was a perfect manipulator, capable of deceiving without leaving the faintest trace of suspicion. In the end, what he gained was murder and the ecstasy of spilled blood. Kaon's emotions defied description. Such betrayal, now of all times, was beyond anything he had foreseen. What did he feel in that instant? Disappointment? Betrayal? Sorrow? The psychopath no longer needed to hide. He mocked the hero openly, reveling in his despair. Kaon had wondered when River would reveal another side of himself, beyond the mask of a noble leader. Yet the truth was worse. He was utterly deranged. Who could have expected such a blade driven straight into the back? Kaon's eyes caught River's stats, and they had soared to godlike heights. The archer had unveiled his secret to the world. He no longer viewed Kaon as mere fortune's child, but as a chosen one, blessed by divinity itself. Again and again, Kaon asked himself, what was the meaning of this? Wasn't gold and status enough? Was it so lacking that he was willing to slaughter his fellow players? The truth was darker still. The tower was River's personal heaven, a place where killing bore no punishment, where it was praised outright. Even now, the hero tried to find some excuse, some justification for the boy who had once shielded him. But it was in vain. The battle began. Merciless, brutal, 3 against 1. Who would emerge alive? The doubles fought without remorse, without humanity. Their purpose was singular: kill. But the hero had his own edge. His drive was greater: to survive. Kyan was faster, stronger, but he stood alone. River's arrows were not ordinary. They were enhanced, piercing clean through solid wood, which meant he had not even revealed the full extent of his power. The deadliest swordsman, the lone healer, and the archer whose shots could kill from the very first breath of combat. This trio gave him almost no chance, not of victory, but of survival itself. Kyan could not fathom how River, a true player, had managed to convince 2 doubles to fight by his side. The archer had believed the duel against the hero would end instantly, but Kyan proved far from fragile. To a psychopath, that was nothing but a gift. The longer the fight, the more blood, the more pain. The 3 struck at the hero all at once. Kyan didn't even flinch. He unleashed his absolute sense. Every movement, every breath, every shift of the eye, he felt it all. No doubt those 2 clones had some serious stats backing them up. Each one had maxed out their most useful attributes. They weren't dumb. But no matter how you looked at it, Kyan was simply better. His stats were double theirs, and on top of that, his sensitivity was maxed to the limit. His strikes were swift and precise. Neither Liam's sword skills, nor Jane's healing magic, could save them from the inevitable. Now Kyan stood face to face with the true psycho killer, River. After witnessing the full extent of the hero's power, River's confidence cracked. He started to shake. The archer dropped to his knees, desperation written all over his face. But Kyan radiated nothing but icy, unshakable confidence. River began to whimper, beg for mercy, humiliate himself, anything to survive. He spat out excuses, claiming he only panicked after seeing the hero's abilities. But the truth was clear. River had completely lost his mind. He begged for just one more chance, swearing he could prove he was a good guy. But it was all a distraction. His hand was already reaching for another arrow. He didn't even get the chance to fire. Kyan, without hesitation, delivered the killing blow. Yeah, this hero wasn't someone you could just hunt down. This guy was something else, like Bruce Lee at his peak. Now only 13 players and 11 doubles remained alive. Kyan had hoped to stick to his plan, but in the end, he was forced to kill a real human. That's when the system message appeared, different this time, glowing a bloody crimson. By slaying another player, he unlocked the path of flesh. If he confirmed it now, he'd gain bonus stat buffs, and even the support of doubles. To walk this path was to embrace the killer's role, and gain overwhelming power. A red vortex began to swirl before him, radiating pure dread. Inside, a silhouette emerged, a woman's figure, wrapped in shadows and flickering light. She was danger incarnate, her purpose to tempt Kyan into crossing over to the side of darkness. Shock flashed across Kyan's face. At last, the mystery was solved. How River convinced clones to fight by his side. Walking that killer's path gave insane perks. Armor, skills, boosted stats, even new talents. Sure, Kyan had been uneasy taking down copies of familiar faces. But hey, they were just clones. From now on, though, he'd have to face players who actually chose the path of blood. Before him stood a chance, a real shot at rising straight to the top without hesitation. But even with all that temptation, he chose the righteous way. No pointless slaughter. He refused to end up like River, a psychomaniac drunk on blood. Finally, he reached the meeting spot where Jane, Leo, and Liam were waiting. But Leo's reaction was weird, way off for his usual self. For a second, Kyan wondered if the redhead was losing it, like full-on crazy mode. Still, he gathered everyone together, thanking them for actually listening to him. The group wanted to know, could he really tell the difference between clones and real players? But just as he started talking, everyone's attention shifted. Standing behind him was none other than another Kyan, same face, same voice. But his clothes were spotless, no blood. The crowd froze. Suspicion filled the air. Who was the real one? Who deserved their trust? It was like staring into a mirror, and Kyan knew The decision was no longer his, but theirs. This was exactly why he wanted to meet his clone earlier, to avoid this kind of mess. But River's madness had already thrown the game off script. Kyan stared down his double. The game had officially started. Truth versus lies. The players freaked out. Kyan swore he'd handle the clones himself. But in that moment, who could they even believe? They demanded answers. Who were the doubles he'd already taken down? Why weren't they here anymore? At this point, only 8 players remained, whose clones were either dead or missing. If Kyan listed the ones he killed, the identities would be revealed. That would prove he was the real deal. But here's the catch. His copy had the exact same info. Both of them gave names, matching, except when it came to Jane and Leo. The rest of the group froze, not sure how to process this insane twist. And that's when Clone Kyan took the stage, loud, confident, smooth talking. He reminded everyone about Jane and Leo, how he'd been with them since the first mission, sticking together through thick and thin. He laid it out straight, why those two had to be the first ones he smoked, not just some randoms. Doubt began to spread among the group. The clone's words sounded just logical enough to sting. He pressed further, twisting the idea that if Kyan's story was true, then it was Kyan himself who had slain River. The clone painted River like some saintly figure, the noble leader, always supporting his team, always urging them to stay united. He leaned on the thought that such a man couldn't possibly have fallen so easily. The unspoken question grew heavier. Could they really trust someone who had killed a real player? Victory in this mind game seemed only one step away from the clone's grasp. He pointed the finger at Kei-chan with smug confidence, playing the role of the righteous accuser. The moment the others realized their leader was gone, their will to strike Kyan flared without hesitation. But Leo interrupted the madness, reminding everyone that if Kyan was a clone, then the same suspicion could fall on him as well. The countdown to disaster was shrinking fast. Action was no longer optional. Kyan stepped forward and admitted to the kill. Yet with that confession came a revelation no one had expected. River had been a psychopathic predator hiding behind an angel's mask. His death had been a necessity, not cruelty. With those words, Keegan struck like lightning, cutting into the archer with precision and leaving him no chance to fight back. The clone, for a moment, was sure the attack had been meant for him, frozen in misplaced anticipation. Liam pointed out the obvious. If Keegan truly were a cold-blooded killer, then gathering everyone here would have given him the perfect advantage already. In that light, the situation suddenly looked far less convincing for the clone. If a clone dared to kill one of the players, he would expose himself instantly, and that was a risk no imposter would take. On the other hand, if Keion really could see through them, then slaying a clone outright would prove he was the real one. The group still wrestled with disbelief. Could kind and dependable River really have been a murderer all along? Kaian's response was sharp and absolute. Yes, River had worn a mask of virtue to hide his devil's heart. Mary, the short-haired girl, snapped at the claim. To her, River was the hero who had saved her during the first mission. How dare anyone stain his honor? With rage burning in her eyes, she lunged at Kaion. But mid-attack, her expression froze. Her scream died in her throat. A single arrow jutted from her back, one that could only belong to one man. River himself had fired with flawless precision. Mary fell, silenced forever. Kaion's words were now undeniable. River's facade was shattered, and only 12 players and 11 clones remained alive. The clone of the fallen archer revealed his true core, a psychopath dripping with bloodlust. Yet his existence didn't last long. A fatal strike pierced him from behind, erasing the copy in an instant. Out of the shadows stepped Dean, a level 8 soldier class player, who apologized to Kaion for his earlier doubts. At last, the truth was clear. The players finally distinguished between clone and human. With no further doubts, they chose to follow their true leader, Kaion. Strange emotions welled up within him, feelings he had never truly known before. Amid the tension of the moment, he began to lay out his vision for what came next. His clone, realizing there was no longer any point in hiding, abandoned all pretense and launched a sudden attack. It was the ultimate paradox. Could Kaion defeat himself? With identical skills and mirrored strength, only cunning would decide the victor. The brutal clash began, and in that chaos, Kaion grasped the secret to defeating all their doppelgangers. The others had to pour every coin of gold into upgrading their stats, sharpening themselves beyond their shadows. If they did so, the clones would never stand a chance. For each fighter was no longer the same as yesterday. They had grown, evolved, hardened. The battlefield ignited into merciless struggle. When the mission finally ended, the survivors returned to the grand vestibule. Death had taken its toll, and grief hung thick in the air. If not for River's treachery, perhaps more of them might have survived. None felt the weight heavier than Dean, who had once stood side by side with the archer. Kyan too carried regret. In his heart, he had wished to avoid the graves of allies. Perhaps in other towers, the situation was even darker. Not all would face trials as he had. Some would embrace the path of a cold-blooded killer. Each coming battle would be harsher, bloodier, more merciless. Yet surely there had to be a reason why he alone had been granted this rare gift, this improbable chance. There were still those who believed in him, and Kyan vowed to do everything in his power to keep them alive. In the midst of his heavy thoughts, Dean approached, offering thanks for the life Kyan had spared. Despite his low level, Kyan had contributed far more than most. Perhaps fate itself had placed some hidden boon in his hands. Kyan took note of the man's caution and sharp judgment, qualities that could make him a pillar in battles yet to come. Dean openly asked forgiveness for ever doubting him, for dismissing his strength. One by one, the others echoed his words, offering their own apologies. From across the hall, Leo, in his usual smug way, shouted that they should have been riding on Kyan's back from the very start, just like he had. Dean then declared for all to hear that he wished Kyan to remain their leader and guide them to the very peak. The boy had not expected to earn such trust so quickly, yet he was moved, humbled, and quietly proud. The distribution of gold began, each reward measured by the deeds of the mission. To their surprise, every survivor received a share, even though none had slain another human, aside from Kyan. The red-haired warrior made a point of boasting about his hard-earned coins, flashing them with fiery pride. And so, the players having followed Kyan's lead, reaped the rewards of survival. The hero himself received a grand reward, 12,500 gold pieces added to his account. The system announced his earnings, unlocking for him an enhanced version of the store. It became clear that to acquire rare artifacts, one first had to raise the rank of the shop itself. Kyan began to carefully consider his choices, weighing what would serve him best in battles to come. Spending 5,000 gold, he purchased a mastery upgrade, sharpening his swordsmanship and, most importantly, ascending to level 3. Once, he had wielded a technique beyond his reach by sheer accident. Now, he could call upon it freely, without restriction. His shopping complete, Kyan turned his gaze toward the others. He transferred 1,200 gold to Jane, leaving her visibly stunned at such generosity. His reasoning was simple. Through battles with kobolds and doppelgangers, she had stood at his side, always lending her strength. In a world where death could claim anyone at any moment, laughter and trust between allies were treasures beyond gold. To support and to smile with those who opened their hearts, that was the true path forward. And for that, Jane's healing arts and gentle spirit were priceless. His gesture filled her with resolve, and she strengthened herself, raising her power to level 2. He also sent 200 gold to Leo, hoping to curb the man's reckless antics. For within him lay potential. If reshaped, he could yet become someone worthy. Easily swayed by coin, the red-haired trickster vowed to obey Kyan's every command. Soon the system announced their next mission. Time had come to test the fundamentals of his newfound third level. The trial of the third floor began at the base of an imposing structure. Its name, the Siege. The system revealed that here, for the first time, they would cross paths with players from other districts. Their task was clear. Within a single day, they were to seize both the castle and its altar. The penalty for failure remained unknown. Into each of their hands appeared a temporary item, the Reversal Stone, a relic exclusive to this floor. Once again, the group marveled at the strange twists each mission brought. Upon seeing this new information, Kyan immediately discerned the first step that must be taken. He recalled Leo's earlier vow of obedience. True to his word, the red-haired follower set out alone on reconnaissance, obeying the command of his leader. Some might call it cruel to send him toward death, after he had placed his trust in Kyan. Yet survival was assured, or at least continued life, for the guide had revealed that this curious stone would return its bearer to the starting point if slain. Of course, Leo would never go without reward, and so, upon successful completion of his mission, Kyan promised him 100 gold. As they approached the entrance, it was time for the red-haired warrior to prove his worth. He hurled himself at the massive doors, smashing them with all his strength. With each strike, the durability of the gate weakened, cracks spreading wider, until at last he shattered them completely. The passage remained open for only 2 fleeting seconds before the doors began to regenerate. Above, archers stood guard, yet strangely they had not loosed a single arrow when Leo approached. At the base of the altar stood nearly 10 figures, and atop it was one more, likely their leader. Kyan silently willed him not to act recklessly, for otherwise the truth of the reversal stone would be exposed. But Leo was not one to heed the warnings of others. The moment he lunged forward, a bullet-like projectile shot toward him, eerily resembling the very stone he carried. It struck him squarely in the face. The impact left grievous wounds, perhaps even mortal. Clutching his face, the red-haired warrior fell to his knees, writhing in unbearable agony. His mind could not grasp what had just befallen him. As his vision blurred and the pull of the stone began to drag him back, he glimpsed something. Was that a gun in her hands? Kyan could scarcely believe his own senses. This was a true firearm. Leo swore that it was real, but such a weapon should have been impossible at this stage. Even Dean, a soldier of level 9, possessed nothing more than blades. It could only mean that someone within that group had chosen the path of the assassin. That revelation explained much, for KN2 had once been offered a legendary weapon, unattainable to others. This battle would be merciless and undoubtedly cruel. To prevent their leader from faltering, Jane encouraged him with steadfast words and a warm presence. The others echoed her, declaring their resolve to fight at his side and conquer the trial. Their faith ignited Kyan's spirit. Together, they were ready to strike. Yet within the castle's walls lingered an ominous silence, a foreboding that horrors awaited them still. With resolve burning bright, Kyan led his group into the assault, armed with the treasure he had gained on the second floor. Through his heightened senses, he detected the 2 archers Leo had spoken of. The red-haired fighter taunted them, believing that if they had not attacked before, they would not do so now. He could have revealed the stone's secret, but Kyan reasoned that such a move would only make others believe he possessed regeneration. As expected, this time the archers released a volley of arrows, leaving no room for escape. Yet the protagonist was swifter, reacting far faster than anyone else could. The arrows hurtled straight toward Leo, aimed with deadly precision. But Kyan cleaved them apart mid-air, the shafts shattering before they could ever reach the red-haired warrior. Using Leo as a foothold, the young fighter pushed off with explosive force. He soared upward, landing upon the structure where the archers stood, ready to end the threat instantly. With a calm and focused expression, the hero struck them. They had never expected such overwhelming power. Though not slain, the archers were grievously wounded, too battered to fight effectively. The group knew they now had to attack with their full strength. It was the only way to conceal the true purpose and power of the reversal stone. With the danger above eliminated, the others charged toward the entrance gates. Leo took it upon himself to shatter them. He invoked Stone Fist Level 2, a technique far beyond his current limits. Jane rushed to heal him, but even so, the red-haired warrior managed to obliterate the gates in a single strike, leaving no chance for regeneration. From above, Kyan heard one of the archers mutter that his mercy would prove meaningless. Inside, the sight was the same as Leo had witnessed before, a cluster of fighters and a woman standing before them, pistol raised. From the atmosphere alone it was clear, she was no leader, but a tyrant. Cold mercilessness burned in her eyes. Consulting his guide, Kagan saw her for what she truly was, an assassin of level 13, armed with the sniper skill at level 3. To have climbed this high, she must have wrought a true massacre upon the second floor. Without hesitation, she raised her weapon and fired directly at Kyan. Unprepared, the young hero failed to react in time. The bullet tore through his chest. Drinking a healing potion, he was forced to admit his mistake. He had underestimated her. Thankfully, he had prepared beforehand, purchasing leather armor akin to a bulletproof vest, resistant even to magical force. If she wielded such a complex weapon, then it was unlikely she had yet acquired an item to restore her mana. Each shot cost her 10 mana, which meant 13 bullets remained. The enemy players advanced with one thought only: victory. Yet Kyan's party was unnervingly fast, terrifyingly strong. Still, what use was speed when forced into close combat against flying bullets? How could they possibly reach the altar when death awaited them almost at the threshold? But the participants had anticipated such a development, and they too had stocked up on enchanted garments. The opposing group stood idle, awaiting orders from their leader, while she alone carried out the battle. Though the bullets did not kill instantly, they drained mana at an alarming rate. Jane, the sole healer, remained behind the lines, restoring wounds and bolstering her allies' strength. When Kayla noticed the strength of Kyan's team growing, she finally sent her own forces into the fray. Perhaps they would have spared the others, but fear of Kayla's wrath drove them to fight. The protagonist clashed with multiple foes at once, giving none a single chance at victory. It was then that the tyrant woman, recognizing his strength, fired a bullet directly at his face. Yet death did not claim him, for Liam intervened, deflecting the shot with a swift strike of his blade. The assassin clearly despised how the swordsman had ruined her kill. Without hesitation, she erased him from the field, cutting him down so he could no longer interfere. Jane could not keep up with the flood of wounded returning from the battlefield. Kayla's shots were precise, merciless. More and more fighters fell with every pull of the trigger. Though they would revive, the slaughter felt all too real. How could one kill with such a cold, vacant expression? Perhaps she even savored it, quenching a thirst for blood much like River once had. The hero unleashed the full force of his beginner swordsman, level 3. With lightning speed, he cut down every enemy who dared remain near him. At last, he stood face to face with the frenzied assassin herself. The overwhelming might of Kyan clashed against a level 13 assassin. The battle promised devastation. Who would emerge victorious? While the hero fought for the altar, Leo pursued his own path, determined to finish off the others in his own way. Kayla's eyes widened as Kyan displayed such strength at only level 3, and he answered with scorn, pointing out that even her level 13 had been far from honest. The altar comprised 3 positions, and to claim it, 3 fighters had to stand upon them simultaneously. Taking one of the positions, the hero triggered the capture sequence. To complete the challenge of the 3rd floor, he still needed 2 more allies to claim the remaining points. But first, he had to rid himself of the psychopath before him. With astonishing agility, Kyan evaded the bullet aimed directly at his heart. In a flash, he counterattacked, striking with a speed Kayla never could have predicted. Yet her reflexes were honed to perfection. She instantly parried the blow with expert precision. The woman could scarcely believe it, that a mere low-level player had matched her strikes. It was unthinkable. The hero resolved to deliver a fatal strike, ending this nightmare once and for all. Yet Kayla would not allow it. With her heightened attributes, she instantly leapt back from Kyan's blade. Mid-air, she fired several shots at him, but not a single one found its mark. None of the bullets even grazed him. He stood motionless, as if he had foreseen them all. Who had taught him to read attacks so flawlessly? Liam was among the strongest swordsmen of this zone, but before entering the tower, he had been a prodigy of table tennis. In that sport, where each round is decided in the span of a heartbeat, tracking the lightning-fast ball was no simple feat. The more skilled the player, the better they could follow the eyes of their opponent and predict the trajectory of every strike. Liam's very title had once been the Genius of Foresight. It was thanks to him that Kyan had gained the insight needed to survive this deadly battle. The hero surged forward with blinding speed, charging straight at Kayla. His strike was devastating, yet not decisive. The blow, as she reloaded her weapon, Kayla realized her strength and arsenal alone would not be enough to claim victory. Meanwhile, the trio had eliminated every last foe on the battlefield and prepared to end the mission before the fallen could revive. Hearing this, the woman grasped the true purpose of the reverse stone, but it no longer mattered to her. Even if she attempted some final trick, Kyan would endure it. The hero resolved to let her strike, then finish her with certainty afterward. But she did not act recklessly. Mad though she was, Kayla was not a fool. She elevated her sniper skill to level 4. Just as the hero had foreseen, he allowed the assassin to unleash her attack. Yet would he be able to counter it and complete the mission? The system resounded, declaring the 3rd floor mission complete. Somehow, their team had emerged victorious on this floor. But how? At the altar, the hero had not expected Kayla to fire her weapon in that instant. Nor had she realized that he intended to pierce her heart with his blade. Her final words before vanishing into nothingness were none other than the hero's name. With her defeat, the trio claimed their positions upon the altar, securing their victory. Suddenly, within the grand vestibule, something like a double mirror appeared, revealing the hall of another group. But victory bore a curse. From the mirror descended a calamity, a towering monster of unfathomable power. Its target, those players who had failed to claim a single life upon the 3rd floor. Panic erupted. Screams, pleas, and cries filled the air as the scene descended into true horror. Kind-hearted Jane longed to help them somehow, But the moment she tried to pass through the mirror-like surface, it struck her with a violent surge of electricity. The monster showed no mercy, leaving mutilated corpses scattered across the ground. Before the players unfolded a nightmarish spectacle that chilled their blood. The final player was mercilessly crushed beneath the beast's foot, reduced to nothing but a crimson stain. When the punishment ended, the loudspeaker announced that only one player had survived, and the groups would be reorganized. Upon hearing this, Kion was shaken to his core, for the sole survivor was none other than the psychopath Kayla. Judging by her expression, she herself was far from pleased with this outcome. As for the hero, rage consumed him until he nearly lost his senses. The next mission on the 4th floor unfolded amidst the ruins of a shattered city. A message reached the players. Within 6 hours, a cataclysm would descend upon the city. To survive, they had to hunt monsters. Through this, portals would open, generated at random as the only means of escape. In total, 20 portals would appear. They could not be transferred, and the players had 6 hours to act. These rules delighted most participants. There would be no direct competition, only battles with monsters. Yet restrictions remained. Portals could not be shared. If one person opened multiple, others would be left behind. 20 portals in all? Was this not a trap prepared by the tower itself? The players agreed that once a portal appeared, they must flee immediately. At last they grasped the essence of this mission. Our heroes had truly become a team. Only one problem remained, a new one no one had anticipated, Kayla. She was not one of them, and had no intention of following their shared resolve. Ignoring everyone else, she set off on her own to complete the mission. And so, our players began their trial. Returning to the moment of her first appearance in the vestibule, the woman immediately made it clear who she was, and that their journey alongside her would be nothing short of torment. She stirred a storm of emotions within the group: disdain, shock, fear, anger. From her very first seconds among them, she caused trouble, beating Leo to the ground. Yet Kion reminded everyone that she was new here, and he had already dealt with assassins before, like River. Suddenly, an unpleasant sensation pierced the hero, so sharp that he instinctively recoiled from her. A notification from his guide appeared. Kayla had marked him as her primary target, certainly not in any romantic sense. The woman turned, reading from the hero's expression that he had understood everything. Kion was a valuable player, and she was fully aware of it. First, we see Leo skillfully cut down an orc, its crooked green face cleaved in an instant. The red-haired warrior managed to open a portal on his very first attempt. Such luck! Yet his desire to hunt further burned brighter, and so he decided to slip away quietly. But on his way back, he encountered Kion, who, as if foreseeing this, had not strayed far. The burly man began to sweat, nervously stammering excuses before the boy. The hero immediately understood his intent, that he had already opened a portal. With brute force, Kion shoved him back into the vestibule. The guide updated after the psychopath marked Kion as her primary target. The assassin would fully unleash her stats on the so-called Day of Blood. Killing him then would earn her a great reward. Kion needed to prepare for that moment, for on that day a brutal battle would erupt and many would fall. An orc lunged at him, roaring in its guttural tongue, hoping to strike him down swiftly. With a single swing of his blade, the hero felled the creature, earning additional points. Yet no portal appeared on his first attempt, unlike with Leo. Defeating monsters would eventually yield results, but not until everyone had opened their portals. Kion decided to turn his attention elsewhere, to observe Kayla. Surely she was already butchering hordes of beasts. Suddenly, a foul stench struck him, twisting his face in disgust. It was the odor of death itself, as if a corpse had been rotting for weeks. The guide hinted to him that orcs naturally reek, but those tied to a portal carried an especially vile stench. That poor wretch, guilty of nothing more than its smell, was slain by Kion in mere seconds. Behind the monster's corpse, a shimmering portal slowly began to form. After a long search for the girl, Kion finally found her, and to her utter shock, he collapsed to his knees before her, as if in desperate supplication. The hero began to beg her outright, pleading for her to allow him to live a little longer. Such behavior from him was the last thing Kayla had expected, leaving her momentarily unsettled. But the boy had a plan. If she awaited the Day of Blood, she would have to spare his life for now, and perhaps even hand him her orcs. It would work against her if Kion failed to open a portal in return, though she did not need to know he had already opened one. Meanwhile, the other players pressed on, opening their own portals until only 5 remained. Summoning every ounce of his inner actor, the hero poured on the desperation, pressing hard upon the girl's sense of pity. Kayla barely contained her pain from his torment and impatiently urged the boy forward. As Kion cut down the orcs, he felt both guilt and a surge of energy. It reminded him of something. Yes, it mirrored his bond with Kayla, where she too wrestled with how best to kill him. The hero had not opened a single portal yet, so he asked her how many she had unlocked to gauge the situation. By the time he had arrived, the girl had already opened 5 portals. That was a lot. If she had opened 5, Kion 1, and the others 11, then only 3 remained. Once those were taken, on the 4th floor, it would leave only the 2 of them, alone, face to face. It was better to part ways with her. Kion feigned a dramatic panic. Only 10 minutes remained before the mission ended. Time was running out. He declared he would find an exit on his own and ran off without looking back. But suddenly, and most unexpectedly, Kayla stopped him. The boy's irritation and unease grew, wondering if she was plotting something. Something was wrong. Had she changed her mind about waiting for Judgment Day? Was she going to kill him here and now? She darted toward him. To attack? Kion instantly drew his blade, bracing for defense. But instead, she grabbed his hand and whispered softly that she had forgotten where her portals were. Wait, was that a blush on her cheeks? She clearly wasn't planning to kill him, yet her behavior still seemed strange to the hero. Kion and Kayla were the last to return to the vestibule. The players eagerly awaited the boy, though not all felt the same about the girl. Leo rushed to his so-called brother, arms wide, ready to embrace him in joy. But the hero struck him with a powerful blow to the face, without hesitation. With such force, the redhead was hurled back several meters. What had gotten into the boy? Nothing serious. Kion had just returned from the mission, and Leo's sudden outburst had startled him. Surprisingly, some participants were genuinely glad to see Kayla again. Jane and Liam welcomed her with sincere smiles. The Prophet of Foresight even suggested friendship, reasoning that despite their rocky introduction, they were all in the same boat now. The girl responded in her usual way, with complete and utter disregard. Leo, however, declared bluntly that it would have been better if she had died on the mission. Kayla, of course, did not remain silent at that. A verbal clash erupted between them, and Kion, watching, thought to himself, perhaps it would have been better to leave her behind. Yet death offered little protection. Better to keep her indebted to him instead. Considering how dangerous she was, the hero resolved to watch her constantly, wary of her schemes. Suddenly, a voice rang out, the last voice they wanted to hear, heralding nothing but misfortune. Before the players stood a familiar face from the lower floors, the grinning trickster, Kum Kum. He barely managed to finish his words before a gunshot rang out. A bullet tore straight through his head. The shot, no one had expected such a spectacle, at least not so suddenly. Sadly, it didn't kill him outright. The rabbit regenerated. He remembered Kayla well from the previous zone. With a single violent motion, the charmer hurled her against the wall, leaving her no chance. He dealt with her so effortlessly, inflicting grievous wounds, yet the girl's eyes reflected nothing but pure hatred. But given Kum Kum demanded silence and calm from everyone. He had only just arrived. It was too early for killings. Not much time had passed since the last mission, yet the trickster was already announcing a new one. But first, the location needed to change. With a snap of his fingers, the rabbit transformed their surroundings. Before them appeared a library. But why? Would books attack them this time? Each participant had to choose only one book. If the players chose a useful book, they would survive. A bad one, and they would die. Their fate rested on that choice. Sharing contents with one another was forbidden. Once the 5th floor mission began, the library would vanish. Kum Kum wished them luck in survival, and disappeared. The players didn't hesitate and immediately rushed to search for useful books. They combed through the shelves, seeking the right section. Naturally, everyone searched for literature related to their own class. Everything else was worthless in this situation. When Kaon opened his guide, he couldn't believe his eyes. It offered him no book on martial arts or combat. Instead, the advice was simply a plain novel, seemingly of no importance. The guide had saved the hero more than once, so he trusted it and chose the book. Changing his decision was no longer an option. Placing his last hopes on the saying, "Don't judge a book by its cover," he began reading. But there were no martial arts teachings, no healing recipes, just a cheap, straightforward pop fantasy story. Other players, however, secured truly useful volumes. Liam chose Hidong Fencing. Leo grabbed one with a loud title, The King of Fist Techniques. Jane opted for a classic medical text. Compared to them, Kyan felt like a complete loser. Dean even managed to build a tent from scratch thanks to his book. Kayla, of course, remained consistent, an unstoppable desire to kill. This time, her victim was a doll resembling Kumkum. Not wanting to get in her way, Kyan wisely decided to leave her alone. Time ran out, and they were transported to the 5th floor. The place they arrived at turned out to be unexpected. It was a classroom. The tower never ceased to amaze. The strangers seated ahead seemed frozen in time, giving no sign of life. When the participants looked at one another, they noticed they had become younger. Could it be that they had turned into immature teenagers? Leo had barely changed, aside from his hair growing slightly longer. Jane appeared just as sweet and charming as her adult self. But Kayla, the one sitting beside him, looked noticeably different. Yet her aggression remained the same, and she made no attempt to hide it. An announcement rang out through the loudspeaker. The mission was revealed to be a role-playing game set in another dimension, where humans and monsters coexisted. From now on, they were cadets of an academy that fought against monsters. Over the course of 4 days, quests would appear. Failure meant being forced into a deadly mission. Kyan had already endured one deadly mission, but for an ordinary player, escaping death would be far more difficult. With that in mind, he regretted choosing the novel instead of ignoring the guide and picking something useful. The task began, and memories required for the roleplay were uploaded into the players. Kyan and the others were thrown into their new roles. The process was painful. An injection of memories struck harshly into Kyan's head. It was as if 2 sets of memories existed within him at once. These new memories, taken directly from the novel, quests would begin after classes, but for now, there was time to relax. The strangers around them began to move, as though they had just awakened from a long slumber. If this was truly the novel Kyan had read, then neither he nor the others were main characters, not even secondary ones. The boy seated ahead was the novel's true protagonist. Taewon, more than just a participant, he was a regressor who knew the future. With that knowledge, fate would grant him countless encounters through which he would gain immense power. The teacher leading the class asked a question, promising store points to anyone who answered correctly. An ordinary cadet would never respond to such a question, but of course Taewon wanted to try. Just as he raised his hand to answer, someone behind him shouted out the correct response first. It was Kyan. He answered clearly, drawing the attention of everyone around him. The teacher praised his intellect openly, granting him points. At last, everything started to make sense. Kyan finally understood why the guide had recommended that novel. Swordsmanship, martial arts, medical texts, none of that mattered here. The protagonist forged for himself a clear and deliberate plan of action. His goal was to seize every opportunity that had originally been destined for Taewon. Evening at the academy began in peace, calmness lingering in the air. As they strolled through the courtyard, Leo asked how Kyan knew the things he had spoken of. He replied that they had come with his newly implanted memories. The red-haired youth called it the hero's good fortune. A small lie, but telling the truth was out of the question. Jane wondered aloud when the quest would finally begin, since classes had already ended. Drawing on what he remembered from the novel, Kyan knew the quest was about to begin at that very moment. And then, as if on cue, each participant received a notification. The quest had started. They had 60 minutes to clear the dungeon. Failure meant a deadly mission. Kyan also knew that the items dropped by the dungeon boss would prove invaluable later on. By canon, those rewards should have belonged to Taewon. But this time, Kyan had no intention of letting him take them. Upon entering the dungeon, they encountered Taewon himself, who was visibly stunned to see these cadets there. From the very entrance, Kyan plunged into battle, cutting down creatures without pause. With one swift and precise strike, he cleaved a monster cleanly in 2. Taewon demanded to know how they had managed to reach this place. Kyan answered with a brazen grin, claiming he wasn't the only one allowed to do everything. In the regressor's mind, questions spiraled. It was strange, far too strange for this world. Even setting aside how they had found this place, ordinary cadets could not possibly be this powerful. Especially those two, Kyan, the unexpected hero, and Kayla, the bloodthirsty psychopath. There was no way he could have forgotten such overwhelming presences. Taewon realized with certainty, if he didn't act now, everything meant for him would be stolen right from under his nose. With forceful intent, he hurled his enchanted spear, instantly seizing the attention of the others. The weapon pierced through multiple monsters at once, tearing gaping holes through their bodies. Then, as if alive, the spear returned, flying straight back into his waiting hand. He had slaughtered the beasts without taking a single step forward, proving just how fearsome his power truly was. All eyes turned toward him, admiration and awe clear in their gaze. Even Kion himself stood mesmerized. After all, the protagonist was the protagonist for a reason. In that moment, Kion understood. Tywin would not hand over the rewards easily. He was ready to fight for them. Within just 12 minutes, more than half of the monsters had already been annihilated. The group advanced at a frenzied pace. For Kion to seize the main prize, he would have to slay as many monsters as possible. Tywin was undeniably a formidable rival, but Kayla watched the whole show unfold, recalling their last mission, and finally realized this dude had played her like a fool. With lightning-fast speed, the hero shredded through orcs, his silhouette darting everywhere like a blur. So damn quick it was unreal. Every strike he landed was devastating, lethal to the core. He didn't give those monsters even the tiniest shot to fight back. Forget about running away. But this time, the girl wasn't about to just sit back. She threw herself into the chaos, taking on a whole squad of beasts. With insane precision, she blasted every creature that dared cross her line of sight. But there were too many orcs. Dodging every hit wasn't exactly a walk in the park. Still, Kayla wasn't sweating it. She slid through their strikes with the same deadly grace, like she was dancing through the battlefield. Around Tywin, a swarm of monsters gathered, but he cut them all down in silence. One sweep of his spear was all it took. His face showed nothing, as if this wasn't his first time, but his millionth. The other players watched, jaws dropping at the sheer epicness of the scene. While Liam stood there practically starstruck, Jane noticed something different. Kion was fighting harder, more desperately than usual. They figured he was going all out just so none of them would end up on a death mission. That thought hit them hard, guilt stabbing in. They still remembered voting against him before. For Liam, it was especially heavy, pushing him to fight with even more fire. A rallying cry echoed through the dungeon. If their leader was giving everything, then hell yeah, they were going to fight harder too. Finally, the last of the orcs fell. The boss room revealed itself before them. The system began choosing who would face the boss. Would it be Kion? The dude had been fighting with every ounce of strength just for this. But nah, by the book, the system picked the official main character of the novel, Tywin. What the hell? After all Kion had poured into this fight, he still didn't get the spot? So what was he supposed to do now? One thing was certain, giving up wasn't an option. Just as the regressor stepped forward to enter, Kion stopped him cold, asking for the chance to take on the boss himself. Tywin hadn't seen that coming, and honestly, he was ready to brush it off without a second thought. But Kion knew exactly how to bait him. He offered to share the secret of breaking the chain of regression. From the very second he learned about the apocalypse, Kion had refused to quit, and this moment was no different. Pushing open the massive gates, the hero stepped into the boss's lair. He was ready to throw down, but was the fight about to begin? Or was something else waiting for him? Standing nearby, Tywin couldn't shake the thought. Who the hell is this guy? And what kind of role does he think he's playing? And the biggest question of all, how did Kion know his greatest secret, that he was a regressor? The spear pressed dangerously against Kion's neck. Tywin's silent threat clear as day. Spill the truth, or else. And then, our boy dropped another bombshell. He knew about the regressor's 32-year winter. Kion, two men stood by a window, sipping wine, talking about life as the snow fell outside. One envied Tywin. His life was stuck on repeat, golden years from 17 to 32, looping forever. But for the regressor, that so-called gift was no blessing. It was a damn curse. Endless cycles had worn him down. Kion promised he'd spill the secret to breaking those chains, but only if Tywin handed him the boss room. Unbelievable. Tywin had dreamed of this moment for thousands of years. He had no choice but to accept. He stepped back, giving up his boss challenge slot, but not without a warning. If Kion lied, it'd get ugly. The hero strode into the room. The dungeon's boss rose before him. And damn right, it looked like a true boss monster. Towering, brutal, built to crush. Kion steadied himself. The novel hadn't described exact tactics for this fight, but he didn't need a guide. His instincts were sharper than any walkthrough. The monster's opening move came quick, a warrior's roar, designed to shred the willpower of anyone foolish enough to listen. But Kyan's absolute sense didn't just sharpen perception, it could block it too. So that mental sound wave didn't do jack. He already knew the second trick. The beast's upper body was armored like steel, impossible to crack. But the lower half, that was its Achilles heel. Kyan went straight for it, his strike precise and merciless. The battle raged brutal. The monster's blade split the hero in half like he was just meat on a chopping block. But no, Kyan didn't die. What the hell? A hologram? A clone? He didn't waste a thought on the fake hit. His eyes stayed locked on the monster's weak point. With blinding speed, his blows hammered down, relentless and exact. At last, he severed the beast's legs completely. The monster crashed to the floor, its massive body shuddering in defeat. And Kyan delivered the final, killing strike, ending the fight, clearing the boss room. From the corpse of the fallen war orc, a rare, glittering item dropped. Later that night, Leo and Kyan chilled out, playing rock, paper, scissors for gold. The redhead kept losing again and again, suspicion creeping in that Kyan was somehow cheating. But come on, how do you even cheat at that? Jane vouched for him. She'd seen him win fair and square. And besides the gold, tonight Kyan had scored something way more valuable. In this novel, there were only two mythical items. Taewin's weapon, the legendary spear, Gungnir, a cheat weapon that never missed its mark, no matter how it was thrown. And the Ring of Nike, a relic that cranked its wearer's luck through the roof. Straight up, it was just as busted as Gungnir, a god-tier cheat item, no cap. For our hero, this ring was about to become the ultimate insurance policy for the future. That meant Taewin would have to move on without it, but Kyan still planned to drop some insider knowledge on him. After everything he'd been through, that was all the guy really wanted. Suddenly, someone slid in next to Kyan. Of course, it was none other than our favorite assassin, Kayla. She wanted in on the game too. Rock, paper, scissors wasn't just luck. It was a test of pure reflexes, a battle of timing and instincts. With Leo, it had been for laughs, but Kayla wasn't joking around. She slammed down a 3,000 gold wager. Kagan's reflex stats were maxed at 50, so he didn't even blink. He tossed 5,000 gold into the pot. The match was on. The next day dawned at the Monster Fighting Academy. All the cadets, including our party, lined up for the morning assembly. Kyan recognized the scene instantly. One of the most cliché tropes in every pop novel. Smash the machine to measure your combat power, in front of the entire squad. And yeah, in case you were wondering, Kyan did bag his 5,000 gold win. No surprise there. One of the academy leaders stepped forward, announcing a magic level test coming up in 2 days. They'd need it for the mission. Liam stood just behind Kyan, hyped as hell to see how the other cadets stacked up. The first challenger stepped up. One punch, score of 43. We don't know the exact scale, but judging by the crowd's reaction, it was solid. Kyan would have known the numbers if his memory uploads weren't missing that detail. Next up, Liam. He slammed a clean 69. Every cadet in the arena, except for our crew, stared wide-eyed in shock. After Liam soaked up the spotlight, Leo strutted up front. He wanted to one-up the guy, and he did, smashing a 75 barehanded, no weapon needed. Some people hated his showboating though, and he got shoved aside by the next challenger's shot. And that challenger, none other than Kayla. Her bullet drilled a clean 98 on the machine. Each new score was blowing the crowd's mind higher and higher. Kyan stood back, watching with pride. His squad's skills were on another level compared to these cadets. Then Taewin stepped up, calm and collected. He'd done this before. His strike landed at 115. He didn't even blink, just walked back like it was routine. Later, at lunch, Leo couldn't resist asking Kyan why he'd hit so weak, not even trying half his strength. But the truth was simple. If he went all out, he'd be grouped with Taewin's squad, and winning from there, way harder. Right in the middle of lunch chatter, everyone's HUD lit up. New quest alert. Mission, rescue Taewin. Time limit, 1 freaking hour. Wait, wasn't this guy supposed to be strong enough to solo his way out of anything? Didn't matter. Quest was quest, and the clock was already ticking. Kyan himself looked caught off guard, but deep down, he knew exactly why Taewin was in trouble. After his regression, Taewin went around mopping the floor with every school punk he could find. But one of those punks? Yeah, turns out he was the only son of Robert, head of Red Moon, one of the top 10 guilds in the world. Daddy didn't take it lightly. He sent in his best killers to hunt Taewin down and erase him. In the original novel, Taewin survives, thanks to the Ring of Luck. But since that little item now sat on Kyan's hand, it meant only one thing. The squad had to step in and keep the regressor alive. If even a beast like Taewin couldn't handle this fight solo, then yeah, things were looking real bad. Beating these guys wasn't going to be some straight-up brawl. It'd take grit, strategy, and some wild plays. No matter how experienced Taewin was, at the end of the day, he was still just a cadet. Saving him was on them. Meanwhile, the assassins were already circling, laying into him hard. Mocking him, jeering, like, "How dare you touch the boss's kid, huh? Think you're hot stuff?" Then, bang, one of them caught a bullet clean through. They weren't ready for that. Kayla wasn't wasting a damn second. She pulled the trigger first. Time was bleeding fast. Leo didn't like her, not one bit. But that fearless move, he respected it, and took it as the signal to charge. Kyan, honestly, had wanted to scope out the enemy, maybe piece together a plan before jumping in. But screw it, what's done is done. He raised his hand, the fight was on. The assassins, totally blindsided by the gun, like, wait, how the hell does a cadet have that? There were only 3 enemies, but the power gap was brutal. The squad's one edge was the ambush, just like Kayla's first bullet had proved. And Taewin, seizing the chance, reacted instantly. He leapt into the fight, striking side by side with the new players. Robert's men were shaken, sure, but they were elite for a reason. Their counter came lightning fast. And so, Taewin and Kian stood shoulder to shoulder, blades and fists flying alongside their team, facing down 3 of the deadliest killers the Red Moon Guild could field. Taewin's mind was spinning. Who the hell were these rookies, and why were they even here? Kian shot him a glance. "Focus on the fight. I'll fill you in after we're done." The redhead wasn't about to wait. He squared up against one assassin solo. With a roar, he unleashed his level 2 stone fist, slamming it straight into the guy's face. But the dude popped a magic barrier like it was nothing, blasting Leo back meters away at breakneck speed. Everyone knew these assassins weren't your average thugs, but that level of defense? Damn, they were untouchable tanks. Their rage only grew, stacking like combo damage with every strike. One of the trio flexed, showing just how low their minimum output really was, and even that was terrifying. They thought these cadets were clueless brats, sheltered from the outside world. But our squad? No, they weren't just kids. The assassins lunged, ready to slaughter every last rookie in sight without a second thought. Both sides collided. Kill or be killed. For the assassins, it was about pleasing their boss. For the squad, it was about clearing the quest. While they held the line, Kayla took the rear guard on Kyan's orders. And yeah, she grumbled about taking commands, but she still did her job. The wounded fell back, only for Jane to patch them up, and then they were right back in the fight. Taewin was stunned. The speed of the healing, and the fact that these cadets even had a healer, unreal. Kyan tested their strength firsthand. These enemies were beasts, but the system wouldn't hand them an impossible mission. That was the cue, time to pull out hidden skills. Liam lit up, unlocking sword mastery straight out of the library of grind. Leo off to the side, Dean was building a damn tent, like he thought they'd need a chill-out spot mid-fight. The assassins didn't get a word of it, and honestly, they couldn't care less why these kids were hyping each other up. Then the trio went full demon mode, activating extra magic skills and syncing them together in one deadly fusion. The result, a massive earth-shaking explosion detonated right in the middle of the battlefield. The blast wrecked the squad, tossing them around hard, but miraculously, no one was fatally down. That was the wake-up call for Kyan. Standard tactics weren't going to cut it. They needed more. The squad was unstoppable only when they moved as one. One body, one will, one strike. But these 3 killers, their combat experience was on a whole other tier. Together, they weren't just fighters, they were a trinity. Break one link and the whole chain collapses. But how? The trio stood like iron gates without a handle or keyhole. No cracks, no openings. The explosion had gutted the squad's stamina, but Jane was working overtime, her healing magic shining at full blast. The brunette assassin scoffed, noting the cadets' insane persistence. If these brats were hunters, this country'd be untouchable. The blonde one, though, was itching to wrap it up. The longer this dragged, the more dangerous it got. But the leader was losing it. Why the hell are these kids still standing? His fury was boiling over. He shot into the air, moving in for a kill strike. One of them had to die here. His target, Jane, the healer, the beating heart of the squad. Take her out, and the whole team crumbles. Kayan couldn't close the gap in time, but Taewon's spear, yeah, that was fast enough. The regressor launched the spear with deadly precision, certain that Gungnir would never miss its mark. The man never expected a strike like that from Taiwan, and for a moment he thought he had been fatally wounded. One link of their chain had been broken, their formation shattered, leaving them exposed. A crack had formed in those steel, unshakable gates, prime time for an all-out strike. The leader of the trio was now burning with murderous rage, ready to slaughter them all without mercy. Kayan could feel it, their impatience, their unease at being stalled. He knew exactly why they were on edge. The book had already revealed everything about them. Just as the three prepared to unleash their mega attack, something unexpected cut through their focus. It was the words of the protagonist, aimed at their master Robert, who was infamous for his uncontrollable fury. He had grabbed their attention by revealing knowledge of Robert, the head of the Red Moon, known for his wild temper. None of them could understand how a rookie cadet could know something so personal about their boss. With every word, he pried those steel gates open wider and wider. Countless subordinates had already died because of Robert's recklessness and hot-headedness. Those words shook them to the core, slowing their movements and dooming them to collapse. The gates burst wide open, and that was the signal for the three strongest cadets to strike. Taiwan drove his spear mercilessly, piercing straight through one of the trio. Kayla unleashed several shots, her bullet slamming directly into the leader's chest. Kayan finished it with the last, fatal blow, bringing the leader down for good. The two remaining stood in shock, staring at their fallen comrade lying unconscious on the ground. They froze, as if unsure whether to fight on, or if there was even a point anymore. Then, one of them broke into laughter, loud, manic, the kind only a true psychopath could pull off. Yet instead, the men lowered their weapons, a strange move, almost like a gesture of truce. One of them pulled his wounded comrade to his side, declaring that even if their boss would rage, he had no regrets. The other stepped in to support from the opposite side, agreeing with him, acknowledging the hunters who carried Korea's future. The trio wished the heroes luck before vanishing into the shadows. The players had saved Taiwan, meaning the quest was cleared. Every one of them, including the regressor, celebrated the victory. They had been inches away from total defeat, with only 2 minutes left on the mission clock. Taiwan wasted no time and demanded answers from the boy, asking if he had known what was about to happen. He gave him no chance to breathe, no gratitude first, only pressing questions when the protagonist had barely survived the ordeal. The boy started acting cocky, teasing like a brat, fishing for some gratitude that he thought he deserved. Right then, Taiwan's life shifted harder than it had in ages, the kind of change he hadn't felt across countless loops. Nothing like this had ever happened in his previous regressions. This time, he actually gave a genuine thank you. Kayan warned him that this regression would be tougher than any before, already turning to leave. Taiwan suddenly questioned if he too was a regressor, because how else could he know so many exact details? It was too precise to be coincidence. But no, the protagonist had nothing to do with these regressions or any others. He was cut from a different cloth entirely. The boy flaunted his presence, declaring himself something far greater, far sharper than Taiwan could ever imagine. He was already walking away, but the regressor reminded him of the promise, to explain how to break the endless chain of events. Day 3 arrived. Their instructor began listing the squads for the dungeon run, scheduled for the next day. The system unveiled Kisyan's new gear, rare armor with solid defense, known as the Armor of Tae. Taiwan had given him this set earlier, realizing again that the protagonist processed everything differently than anyone else. The fourth, thanks to Nike's ring, Kayan landed in the strongest squad. Luck really did carry weight, bailing you out in places you'd never expect. To earn the real prize, he needed to end up on Taiwan's team, but it was way too early to celebrate. Evening fell, the last night before the cadets' stay at the academy would end. The regressor asked if the boy knew that, once they entered the dungeon, everything would collapse into chaos far beyond the plan. Disasters weren't rare in this world, but for several to hit at once? That was absurd. Each time, Taiwan fought tooth and nail, but no matter how, he could never uncover the cause. He pushed the boy for answers. After all, this wasn't just some random cadet. He had to know something more. In the novel's script, accidents struck 3 of the squads, and only Taiwan's squad managed to survive, but even then, only barely. Strangely enough, the book never explained the why. No reason, no clue, not even scraps of detail. Kion apologized, admitting he didn't know the cause. But the regressor wasn't buying it. He was ready to wring the truth out of him. How could this be? The boy seemed to know everything, so even if the script was written, shouldn't they at least try to fix it? But the truth was, the protagonist didn't know. The author had left no real hints, only an ambiguous ending, and what the hell were they supposed to do with that? Kayla happened to pass by, hearing voices. Curiosity got the better of her, and she decided to sneak a peek. What she saw was, let's just say, awkward, a scene that looked way too suggestive, with the two boys gripping each other's shirts like they were about to strip. Awkward was an understatement. It was bad for Kayla, stuck as the witness, and worse for them, since anyone could have taken it the wrong way. Either way, she decided to dip out before things got weirder, even though the two were already scrambling to justify themselves. The next day arrived. Kion's squad stood at the portal, ready to dive in as the instructor announced the beginning of the trial. The squad stepped through the portal, their mission clear: wipe out the training dungeon. The regressor had his own disaster to handle, and now Kayla was here too. She was tough to deal with before, but now she was downright impossible. The team had to split up and scout the dungeon. If they found anything interesting, they were supposed to report back using the comms they'd been given. Kagan broke off on his own, moving deeper as he started probing the terrain. The disasters were fated to strike the 4th, 9th, and 12th squads. The 4th, that's where Kion and Tywin were. The 9th had Jane and Kayla. They'd be fine. With a healer on their side, they had a safety net. And there was no way the tower's favorite psycho, its twisted guardian, was dying on just the 5th floor. But as Kion pushed forward, a low, menacing growl echoed through the darkness. Heavy footsteps followed. It wasn't just one creature out there. Out of the shadows, a pack of twisted beasts emerged, eyes locked on him with the raw hunger of predators ready to tear his throat out. Kion unsheathed his blade, stance sharp, heart steady, battle ready. But he wasn't alone. Something was behind him. Another monster? No, it was Den. The kid cowered at his back, trembling, crying, whispering apologies. 17 years old, no real experience, already breaking. Kion couldn't figure out what the kid was even apologizing for, or why he was sobbing in the first place. Within minutes, the monsters were nothing but corpses at his feet. For Kion, the fight had been child's play. But Den was still haunted by that day, the day everyone had turned on Kion, sentencing him to die. The guilt was crushing him, and he begged for forgiveness. He hadn't had the courage to say it before. By now, he felt like he should have confessed long ago. Tears streamed down his face as he kept pleading, unable to stop. The kid had such a soft heart. For someone like him, the tower would be brutal. Survival wouldn't come easy. Kion gripped his shoulders, steady and firm, telling him not to waste his breath on apologies. If the same situation happened again, he should make the same choice. Den froze, stunned. Did the hero really just tell him to pick someone else to die again? Anyone could drop dead at any moment, and with a personality that fragile, Den didn't stand a chance of making it to the top. Kion's voice sharpened, demanding that the boy stop thinking about others first. If he wanted to live, survival had to come before anything else. But then Kion's expression softened, the anger fading. He ruffled the kid's hair, telling him he'd done the right thing, and that he had nothing to blame himself for. The rest of the way, Den couldn't stop staring at Kion with wide-eyed admiration, thinking how insanely cool this guy was. He even wondered if the hero had been this incredible before the apocalypse hit. But the truth was, before all this, he grew up in an orphanage, barely surviving, always fighting off the discrimination stacked against him. By the time he hit 20, he was nothing more than an office drone, scraping by, paycheck to paycheck. Everything shifted the day he stumbled across a small monster on the street. Something inside him awakened, something that marked him as different. And honestly, if it hadn't been for that one pill he swallowed right before the apocalypse, there was no guarantee he'd even still be alive. And really, who was he back then to be preaching to anyone? Den noticed the irony. Kion kept telling him to look out for himself, but the guy was always throwing himself into danger just so others could keep breathing. The kid decided right there. He wanted to be like Kion, helping people without asking for anything in return. The hero reminded himself that what mattered most was the future. No point in dwelling on the past. They soon came across a strange wall. Den stopped, eyes locked on it, studying every detail. His class as a researcher kicked in, and he sensed it. an odd, pulsing energy seeping from that spot. Kaien's absolute sense picked up nothing, but thanks to Den's unique skill set, something hidden had been uncovered. The regressor motioned Den to step back as he tightened his grip on his weapon. Channeling the full might of a level 3 beginner swordsman, he swung with all his force at the wall. The strike shattered it wide open, unleashing a surge of bizarre yet overwhelmingly powerful energy. In an instant, the two of them were teleported inside. The system's cold notification rang out. They had entered the labyrinth. Nothing in the original novel had mentioned a labyrinth. Tywin hadn't said a word about it either. That left only one option. This place wasn't part of the author's design. Maybe, just maybe, it held the root cause of the dungeon's chaos. Moving deeper, they spotted a creature unlike the usual monsters. It looked beastly enough, but it was different. It could speak. Cain pulled up its stats. Name, Jemba Jemba, race, elf, role, repairer, creator. In short, he was a builder, but his stats were stacked, towering at least 5 times higher than Kion's. And the worst part, Jemba Jemba wasn't alone. His comrades were just as insanely powerful as he was. At first, Kum especially pointed at Kion. They had twisted the plot itself, handing Tywin a massive spoiler. The high-level monsters surrounded Kion, closing in, their voices debating his fate. The regressor's calm wavered. Panic prickled at the edge of his thoughts. Or maybe it wasn't panic. Maybe it was just the weight of all that unwanted attention. Especially the kind of attention directed a little too low on his body. Not that it meant anything. It was just that the elves were short. Nothing else. The mini-monsters questioned how he'd ended up here. He answered with the most ridiculous excuse possible, that he'd just stumbled in after reading the story. Honestly, it sounded like nonsense. Nobody should have believed it. But in its own twisted way, there was some truth to it. When he flipped the question back at them, they admitted they were only trying to patch up the gaping holes in this broken novel. For the first time, the regressor wasn't facing bloodthirsty beasts, merciless killers, or boss monsters. These were just worker elves. He caught on fast. With guys like this, brute force wasn't the play. Smooth talk was. He started praising their work, saying the whole story would have been trash without their fixes. Hearing that, the elves lit up, finally recognized for their efforts. Jemba Jemba was moved. At first he'd wanted to kill the regressor, but now he figured he'd just erase the guy's memory and let him go. The mini-monster raised his hand toward Kaon's face. But if the memories were wiped clean, then what would have been the point of all this? Time was running out, and Kion had to think of something fast. He claimed there was a huge plot hole on the 3rd floor of the dungeon, and asked if they already knew how to patch it. The elves were stunned. How could some random human even know that? Even if the novel was garbage, there were still lessons hidden inside it. Kaon jumped on the chance, saying he could tell them exactly how to fix it. The mini-monsters sent both him and Den back, unharmed, the rift sealed shut. Den grew nervous when he saw Kion standing frozen, staring blankly ahead. Had they tortured him in there? But the regressor didn't react at all, still trapped in his own thoughts, still shaken by what just happened. Let's rewind to the moment before, when Koyan first offered the elves his help. They couldn't just turn him down. If that error wasn't fixed, the builder's reputation would take a heavy hit. Kion laid out his plan. What if the 3 separate dungeons the teams were in right now were fused into one? The dwarves mulled it over. If the dungeons merged, the monster situation would actually become manageable. And they admitted it was a legit solid idea. But in that case, if the dungeon became that massive, the rewards had to scale up too. They explained it as a basic law of cause and effect, something that couldn't be broken. On the flip side, if Tywin earned too great a reward, the entire plot could spiral out of control. Kion fired back that maybe he himself would be the one to win and claim the prize. The regressor had done everything he could. Now, the choice was in the elves' hands, and in the luck of Nike's ring. But then the builder decided it'd be simpler just to wipe his memory. This side character was getting way too full of himself. Nike didn't lift a finger to stop it. Kion was about to lose every memory of what had just gone down. That was when Den tried desperately to shake some kind of reaction out of him. The poor regressor barely managed to mutter that he was fine and that there was no need to keep saving him. The kid apologized again and again. He just panicked, and of course he had. Kion looked like someone who'd literally had his memories erased. Luckily, the 5th floor mission was time-limited. In truth, the regressor remembered everything. At the very last moment, he shouted that he'd disappear tomorrow anyway. There was no point erasing the memories of someone who wouldn't be here long. As they moved on, he noticed something behind Den's back, a hammer he definitely didn't have before. The kid admitted that while the elves were busy focusing on Kion, he'd quietly snatched it for himself. The hammer only lasted a single day, but it could repair any damage and boost the success rate of item upgrades. Den explained that he'd tried fixing something with it, and the regressor realized maybe this kid wasn't so weak after all. Either way, he'd struck a deal with the elves, and for Kion alone, a hidden quest quietly took shape. He had to fix that gaping hole in the story, and for that, he'd earn a personal reward. But he had to move in the shadows, unseen. Out of nowhere, the ground beneath them shook violently. Stones rained down from the ceiling, and a deafening rumble tore through the dungeon. That was the moment Kion realized the chaos had begun. A surge of unknown energy erupted. The dungeon itself roared in anger. Stronger monsters appeared, and all 3 dungeons merged into one nightmare. The kid started to panic at the madness around him, but our regressor stayed cool as ice. They split up. Den was told to track down Tywin and stick to him. Being an explorer, he'd figure his way out. Kion reassured the boy that he'd handle it. He was way stronger than he could ever imagine. Still, Den's fear wasn't for himself. It was for his friend. How would Kion survive fighting alone in this hell? But no one could predict that. The script would decide the outcome. The new wave of monsters was nothing like the ones before. Even at a glance, these beasts were built to crush. The cadets struggled against poison-spitting creatures, proof they weren't even close to the level of real warriors. Jane stood at the rear, healing the wounded, when one fighter turned back to thank her. In that instant, a stinger shot toward him, fast and lethal, a death strike. But before it landed, the monster collapsed lifeless. It hadn't tripped, the beast was dead. And the credit went to the gunner girl, the one who never missed a single shot. Kion cut down beasts as he moved forward, until gunfire echoed through the tunnels. That had to be Kayla's squad. The regressor sprinted toward them, ready to help, even though they clearly outclassed the average cadet. His true mission stayed the same: wipe out the dungeon's monsters while staying unseen, careful not to ruin the story. The bloodbath ahead would be brutal beyond doubt. Our hero pressed deeper into the tunnels, straight toward the deadliest of them all, the Scorpion boss, the big bad freak. The Scorpion King towered over him, 10 times his size, its stinger dripping with venom that promised instant death. Fighting a monster that strong was already a nightmare, but add poison breath to the mix, and it was hell times 10. There was no way Kion could strike without risking a fatal counterattack. Team 4 had their regressor, Tywin, who could pull them through, but Kion's task was to protect the other 2 squads. Yeah, part of it was about grinding for that higher rank. But more than that, he couldn't stand by and let a catastrophe wipe everyone out. He dodged the Scorpion's venom strikes with lightning reflexes. In a single bound, he soared above the beast, ready to drop a crushing blow. But he'd overlooked the Scorpion's deadliest weapon, its razor-edged lethal tail. The strike sent Kion slamming into the stone floor, leaving a crater beneath him. The pain was sharp, bone-cracking. The monster couldn't really show emotions, but the way it loomed over him, it was like it was damn proud it almost killed the kid. Nah, rushing like that was just serving himself up on death's plate. He had to think of something real, something that would actually work. Luckily, he had a backup plan. He didn't want to burn it this early, but there was no other choice. Just the night before, their teacher had given them a trial where the reward was a one-time use, perfect shield. Kion launched into his do-or-die strike, no turning back now. The moment the beast spewed venom, the regressor snapped the perfect shield into play. That item was broken as hell. It blocked 100% of any attack. Didn't matter how much that oversized bug flexed, its hit couldn't even scratch the surface. Now it was payback time. Kion unleashed the power of the beginner swordsman class, slicing the beast down with a single blow. The monster plunged straight into the abyss, dragging its threat with it, and Kayla's team was finally free. Without wasting a breath, Kion stepped through the portal, heading straight for Leo's squad. For some reason, the guy actually gave a damn about that reckless punk. Their first impressions of each other couldn't have been more opposite, and no way had he expected their bond to twist like this. Whether he liked it or not, the regressor genuinely worried about that loudmouth. Lost in thought, he didn't notice how dead and empty the world around him had gone. That's when something shot up from the ground right in front of him, fast and nasty. It wasn't some top-tier monster, just a horned mole. Kayan cut the ugly thing down instantly, not even breaking stride. One mole wasn't a problem, but there weren't just one. There were dozens. A swarm of grotesque little beasts piled at him all at once, like flies on rotting meat. Small and quick, they were easy to underestimate. Without focus, even he could get wrecked in no time. The regressor just hoped Leo was still alive, still holding on with everything he had. Power he still had plenty of, but Leo's patience was snapping fast. The redhead fought like a berserker, pure rage fueling his strikes. The little freaks barely had time to crawl out of their burrows before Leo was cutting them down mid-emergence. With every kill, he was wearing himself out more, so much that he missed the one sneaking up on him from behind like a rat. Its horn was aimed straight at his back, ready to pierce through, almost, because Kayan skewered it first, pinning the creature on his blade like it was nothing more than a marshmallow. Relief washed over the redhead. Seeing his comrade alive and mostly unscathed, just a little roughed up, was enough to bring fire back into his eyes. The regressor was glad Leo had survived, but the rest? They hadn't made it. Leo could only apologize, his voice heavy, for not being able to save everyone from those filthy moles. Even if they were just side characters in someone else's story, they'd been real people, humans who could have kept living, laughing, vibing. The redhead was lost, not knowing what the hell they were supposed to do next, or if they'd ever crawl out of this death trap. Then the ground beneath their feet began to quake. Another earthquake, or something worse. Kayan stood solid, unmoving. He already knew what was coming, and he was ready, both in body and in spirit. His plan was locked in. Beat the dungeon's second boss, crush the quest, and save every life he could. The next day, the Academy's headmaster gave his condolences, mourning the tragedy that had gone down in the underground. No payout, no words could ever heal the hearts of those who had lost everything. Later, Kayan and Tywin walked side by side after the speech. The regressor carried guilt heavy in his chest, blaming himself for not saving everyone. Tywin reassured him. No matter how many regressions he went through, the protagonist could never fully erase the bloodshed of the dungeon. But this time, Kayan had saved far more people than anyone else ever could have. Tywin admitted it. Kayan wasn't just a regressor, he was something greater. The regressor promised he'd lean on Kayan for advice from time to time. Too bad he'd never really get the chance. Tomorrow's Kayan wouldn't be the same as today's, because they were heading back to the tower. Just like Tywin, at age 32, reaching the end of his arc, the regressor was climbing to the next floor of the tower. The finale was already written. Kayan would reach the top. But what waited for him there? He wasn't about to sit back and let fate call the shots. He and his crew would carve out their own happy ending. The squad wrapped up their quests successfully, stepping back into the tower's grand lobby. They were buzzing, hyped, trading stories of the mission, hyping each other up for the insane work they'd pulled off. Kayan just sat back, soaking in the glow of victory. He'd been leveled up, middle swordsman, rank 1. But that wasn't even the best part. For snagging first place fair and square, he'd unlocked a reward for a secret mission, a bonus subclass slot. This time, though, he was hyped. Extra loot was extra power. Crushing the item in his hand, he unlocked a whole new class slot. What was it gonna be? Obviously, something insane. A guy like Kayan deserved nothing less than pure, unstoppable firepower. The anticipation was killing him. For some reason, the system was lagging hard, loading slower than ever. Then it hit, his second class, the mighty, unstoppable god-tier beast conqueror. At first, it felt like a joke. What the hell was he, Snow White with a sword? But then the pieces started clicking in his head. Back before the apocalypse, before the tower, he used to come home from work, like any normal dude. On his way back home, a little stray cat had once tagged along behind him, but Kayan couldn't take it in. The cat was homeless, but the guy just couldn't afford a pet back then. He ran off without looking back, leaving the tiny creature all alone in the cold. Back in those days, his wallet was empty and survival came first, so he had no choice but to ignore the cat. But now he was a beast conqueror. Maybe this class wasn't so lame after all. Besides, deep down, Kayan had always loved animals. His guide finally chimed in, sending him fresh strategy notes. Man, it had been forever since that voice popped up. Felt almost nostalgic. On the 7th floor, there was a monster waiting, one that could be tamed. Not only did it pack heavy combat skills, it was tough enough to carry Kayan on its back. A fighter that doubled as a mount, Probably some kind of wolf-like beast, right? Kyan felt real hype. Soon he'd finally have a companion, a pet of his own. For the first time, he was actually impatient for the next quest. But thinking they'd blaze through to the 7th floor quick, fatal mistake. The mission on the 6th floor was pure hell, an endless battle where monsters just kept spawning. Everyone was grinding at their absolute limit, pushing way past their breaking points. And somehow, together, they shredded everything that came their way. Each fighter had their own methods, their own brutal style, but as long as it worked, it didn't matter. Kayan had lost count of the beasts he'd cut down, slashed apart, or left broken on the ground. Different shapes, different levels, different power. Didn't matter. He gave every single one of them a one-way ticket to the respawn void. But no matter how many they killed, the endless grind was draining the squad to the bone. The only one who seemed to actually enjoy it was Leo. To him, and it made sense. Back on the 5th floor, leveling up wasn't even a thing. Now the redhead was milking every chance to grow stronger. He noticed that Kayan had already climbed up to level 5. But for the regressor, levels didn't mean jack. His stats were already capped out. Until he could break through his limits with training, grinding levels or blowing gold was useless. Damn, he almost missed the old days on the 5th floor. No training, no grind, loot just dropping into your hands like candy. Gunshots cracked in the distance, which meant Kyla was nearby. That psycho had no stat limits at all, and the unfairness of it all burned Kayan up inside. The killer caught his glare, sensing the anger boiling off him, which was exactly why he decided to stay the hell out of her way. After all, she was keeping the battlefield under control, and that was something worth respecting. And finally, the moment came, the fated meeting between Kayan and the beast that would become his companion. The loudspeakers boomed across the tower, announcing the launch of the 7th floor mission. This floor wasn't just another battlefield. It was the realm of enhancement. Here, hunting monsters carried a chance to drop enhancement stones. Nobody had a damn clue what they actually were. But those stones, combined with gold, could boost the durability of gear, everything except weapons and armor. The rules were simple. For 72 hours, players could freely travel between the lobby and the floor, hunt hard, get stronger. When the clock hit 0, the floor would be auto-wiped, like nothing had ever spawned there. Soon, one sharp-eyed player noticed a new item in the shop, a probability stone, one that bent the odds of enhancement. Finally, the players were starting to get it. They began stacking stones like addicts, preparing for a power surge. The mission was on, and every single fighter was fired up for war. They rushed the portal, bodies shoving and sprinting, eyes burning with impatience. Almost everyone. Kayan stood behind, chilling, waiting for the chaos to funnel through first. On his finger was the Nike ring, and for him, this floor was more than a battlefield. It was a treasure vault built for its rightful owner. And waiting somewhere inside wasn't just loot, but the prize meant for him alone, his future companion. Power-ups and a pet, 2 birds, 1 stone. Across the floor, players went wild, cutting down every monster in sight without hesitation. But stones didn't drop on the first kill, or even the 10th. They were grind to the bone rare. Still, guys like Dean kept swinging, convinced that persistence would eventually break the RNG. Meanwhile, Kayan was wrecking monsters barehanded, fists cracking bones like steel hammers. Turns out, to tame a beast you had to fight without weapons at all. Most challengers didn't even live long enough to find out. Leo was the first to score a drop. The moment he did, the tower tagged him with yet another title, God of Enhancement. Seriously, how many damn nicknames was this guy gonna collect? Kayan couldn't help but wonder what Redhead was even planning to enhance. After all, Leo fought with literally nothing. No sword, no shield, just raw fists. What the hell was he gonna boost? But that was Leo, stable as ever, doing his own thing. Kayan turned to a fallen creature, eyeing it as a candidate for a pet. Too small, too weak, and worse. It was already dead. Total no-go. Still, there was plenty of time left, or so he thought. No need to rush, right? He checked the timer, expecting hours to spare, but reality slapped him. Only 2 hours left. Where the hell had the time gone? In that window, he'd only met a handful of candidates. A bear king, massive but clumsy, all muscle and no grace. Cute, but useless in battle. A slick black wolf, fast and vicious, but with 0 stamina, he'd gas out mid-fight. A 2-headed cat, weirdly fascinating, but way too freaky to be a true partner. Each option fell short, imperfect in its own way. Well, At least Kion had bagged 3 enhancement stones. Grind paid off. But the real core of the 7th floor wasn't just upgrades. For him, it was about locking down a true companion. Suddenly, from the bushes, something stirred. Another wolf? Nah, this was different. Out stepped a beast built like a tank, radiating raw power. Could this be it? The one he'd been hunting for all this time? The creature was level 20. Its name, Kentuo. Kinda kangaroo-like. Not flashy, not cute. Honestly, too ugly to be anyone's pet, but Kion had to put it to the test. One-on-one, no weapons, no tricks, just Kion's fists against a level 20 beast. The damn thing towered over him. They clashed head-on, strikes splitting the air. The kangaroo's blows were bone-crushing, no doubt about it. Even Kion had to admit, this monster was the real deal. Its leg muscles packed insane spring, every kick carrying explosive force. It moved with lightning speed, faster than the eye could follow. And it wasn't just strength. The beast had the arrogance to stare him down mid-battle. But Kion wasn't some scrub. His stats were maxed, and he knew he was stronger than this oversized kangaroo. Maybe it wasn't as badass as the wolf, or as adorable as the cat. But something about this ugly monster screamed perfect match. This was the one. Mounting the beast, Kion yanked its ear, flexing dominance, showing who was alpha. Just like that, Kentao bowed in defeat, recognizing its new master. Now came the fun part, naming his new homie. He called him Kenzo, fusing his favorite cartoon hero's name with kangaroo. Looking at him, Kion couldn't deny it. The beast was hideous, jagged teeth, crooked face, the works. For a second, he actually thought maybe he should have hunted for something small and cute instead. Then, out of nowhere, Kenzo began to glow, blinding light erupting around him. And just like that, the ugly giant shrank down into a tiny, defenseless-looking creature. Kion was floored, straight up enchanted by the sight of this adorable little miracle. Time, but nobody gave a damn about the rewards or their stones. All eyes locked on Kion's new companion. The tiny kangaroo had stolen every heart in the room. A battle pet, but ridiculously cute. And the one question burning in everyone's mind was the same. How the hell did he end up with a pet? This time, Kion knew he was in hot water. Explaining how he suddenly unlocked another class, Beast Tamer, wasn't going to be easy. No way anyone would just buy that it came out of nowhere. But deep down, he always knew this moment would come. Now he had to own it, had to justify it. Out of nowhere, Liam cut through the tension, claiming that for a player of Kion's caliber, one class was never going to be enough. The crowd nodded, fired up, and started hyping him up like he'd just hit another legendary rank. Kenzo, watching from the side, figured his master was straight up like Splinter guiding his turtles. Kion then tossed the question, did anyone else actually upgrade their gear? Dead silence. No eye contact. Everyone avoided him like kids caught slacking in class. Then a voice broke the quiet. Turning, he spotted Den. Kid had a leather adventurer's backpack strapped on. Unique class vibes. He stood proud, like he'd just leveled up in life. Right, Kion remembered. This kid had jacked a hammer off those 2 idiots earlier, with built-in upgrade potential. According to the guide, Den could enhance it 3 times over. For someone that young, dude was killing it. Way more talented than he first looked. Jane chimed in, asking if Kion himself had upgraded anything. He didn't hesitate, pulled out his enhanced unique sword. Just looking at it felt like you could get cut. His armor gleamed almost brand new, also rocking unique class status. The set looked fierce. Together, the sword and armor gave Kion an aura of a seasoned warrior, deadly strong, sharp as hell, but also damn charismatic. His gear didn't just protect, it amplified his whole presence. The squad was awestruck, all except Kayla. Poor girl had come out of the 7th floor empty-handed, not even a single stone. For that brief moment, though, everyone forgot about the tower. Pure celebration, good vibes all around. Until the lights cut out. Darkness swallowed the lobby, and with it came the heavy silence of dread. Then a voice, sweet, familiar, and terrifying enough to freeze the blood in their veins. The rabbit faces shifted, shock, fear, pure hatred. Every emotion boiled at once. The smiling demon announced he had a little show prepared, claiming it was to lighten the mood. Everyone instantly knew this was bad news, real bad. Kumkum asked if anyone had ever felt envy. That raw, aching envy, staring at someone else's skill and wishing it was yours. The rabbit snapped his fingers. Torches ignited in crimson fire, painting the hall in a bloody glow. But it wasn't just the flames. Something else appeared. No, someone. Kum laughed, claiming he'd found a way to make their secret desires reality. And before the players, new figures began to materialize. Another squad showed up. Seriously? Did this mean they'd have to throw down against them too? The cute little psycho, face twisted with madness and laughter that echoed like nails on glass, made it clear this was all just entertainment for him. The system dropped the bomb. Event start. Objective: kill players from other zones, and as a prize, steal the Fallen's ability. Kayan had seen it coming after such a long silence from the tower, but even so, rage burned in his chest. He had no way of knowing how these new people would act. If they were sane, they'd avoid a bloodbath. But that chance died fast, the moment one psychopath aimed her weapon without hesitation. It pissed him off? For real? She jumped straight into this without even thinking? Of course, the rival team took it as a declaration of war, weapons flashing into their hands instantly. And yeah, what else could anyone expect? Kian had a killer in his squad. Kill someone, get rewarded, that was her ideal playground. Still, he couldn't help but hope there was a shred of humanity left in her. But Kayla had chosen her path from the start. She was a killer, and she intended to stay one. The leader of the rival group questioned the meaning of that pointed gun, wondering if war had already begun. Kasian stood unarmed, hands at his sides, mind torn between resisting and wondering if they were all just slaves to the tower's will. The rabbit, eyes glowing with excitement, announced he would take the players to a stage. A single blink and the world vanished. Everything, everyone, swallowed into nothingness. Kayan opened his eyes in a bed. A room. Whose room was this? The system message struck. Players had 10 seconds to move into another room. Fail, and death would claim them. No time to hesitate. Kayan bolted, searching desperately for any door before his heart stopped. But not every room would open. Seconds ticked down. His chest tightened. He had to find somewhere, anywhere, or die. Finally, a door opened, but someone was already inside. And it wasn't coincidence. A man sat waiting, motioning for Kishan to sit. Michael, the rival leader, level 25, commander class, calm, collected, and ready. The death warning was a fake, just a trick designed to spark fights between desperate players. In moments like these, with tension suffocating the air, meeting anyone meant a high chance of bloodshed. Yet Michael, cool as ever, offered water. Simple, but classy. He kept his etiquette even here. Strange thing, he even called Kayan a leader, despite his low level. How the hell did he sense that? This man wasn't ordinary. From the start, Michael made it clear he wasn't looking to attack. But if Kayan's crew wanted war, he wouldn't hold back. Sitting down, Kayan countered with the truth. Their squad had no desire to fight either. The rival leader confirmed his stance, saying way too much blood had already been spilled in this cursed place. He had zero desire to keep losing his comrades just to feed the tower's twisted bloodlust. Michael's words hit Kayan hard, dragging back memories of his own outlook on the apocalypse. The vow he made to himself and his crew, that he'd never again fall for the tower's manipulations, that he'd lead them all to the very top. The promise that they'd build their own future, free from anyone's control. In that moment, KM wondered if maybe Michael was just trying to protect his own squad the same way he was. If their goals aligned, then the commander offered an alliance. Kayan agreed, but with every player scattered across different rooms, how could they let everyone know? Michael revealed it was easy. He had telepathy. As long as he was sure Kayan's squad wouldn't attack, he'd send the signal and command his people to stand down. Kayan was stunned by that level of honesty. Because what if he decided to steal such a busted ability for himself? But there wasn't another way. If they wanted to avoid more deaths, they had to build some kind of trust. Kayan doubled down, promising that his squad was mostly peaceful, and as long as Michael didn't strike first, they'd be safe. Still, he admitted there was one person in his group he couldn't control. Michael instantly figured it out. Kayla, the one who had aimed the gun. But Kayan swore, if she became a problem, he'd shut her down himself. Hearing that, Michael chose to trust him, sending out a mental order to his own squad. Kayan was then dropped into an empty room, finally with a moment to think. He felt like the talks had gone well with the rival leader. But had they really? His next move was obvious. He had to find Kayla, and he had the perfect way to do it fast. After clearing the 7th floor mission, his gold stash had stacked past 50,000, enough to snag a random ability box. The skill he pulled couldn't have come at a better time, It gave him vision of the map, every room, every player. With it, he realized they were stuck in a small 5-floor hotel, quiet for now. Kayla was on the 5th floor. But then, in Leo's room, there was a rival player, and they sure as hell weren't talking about the weather. Panic shot through Kion as he bolted from his room, racing to stop the inevitable. He kicked open the door, only to see the body of a rival sprawled lifeless on the floor, with Leo standing over it. Rage exploded inside him at the sight. He lost control. Kion grabbed the redhead and tore into him, furious that he had just ignited a war between the squads. Leo had no clue what Kion was raging about, stumbling over excuses like his life depended on it, which it honestly did. He swore the rival had barged into his room first, pressing cold steel to his throat. Kion would have never believed him, if not for the sudden system notification. It revealed that assassins had eyes that could see the kill count etched into another player's soul. That was the meaning of the assassin's eyes, but why the hell did the system drop that bombshell right now? Could it be Kayla had seen Michael's kill counter from the very start? In that instant, it all clicked, and Kion finally let Leo go. Kayla had spotted the truth. The enemy commander wasn't who he claimed to be. Kion marched straight to the source, ready to face the storm head-on. With no hesitation, he drew his blade, pointing it directly at his so-called ally. At his true enemy, the real killer. Michael shed his mask at last, revealing his true face. His aura screamed bloodlust, admitting that Kion's abilities made him crave to slaughter him. He was ready to kill and take what wasn't his, and Kion's fury burned hotter than ever. The one thing Kion couldn't figure out was why Michael sent his pawns to kill for him, instead of taking the rewards himself. Michael's twisted logic was simple. The stronger his army grew, the stronger he became. He was sure Kion could never stand against him and his legion alone. And maybe that would have been true. Alone, Kion couldn't win. But he wasn't alone. Kion stood with his battle partner, Kenzu, against the killer and his army. The clash was inevitable. The commander couldn't even process what he was looking at. A monstrous combat-ready kangaroo. And honestly, Kion wasn't about to argue with that description. The longer Michael studied him, the more intrigued he became, seeing Kion as something far beyond ordinary. But Kion and Kenzu already had their next moves locked in. First, they needed to wipe out his squad of henchmen. A brutal task, but nothing impossible for this duo. Every trick was on the table. Kenzu lashed out with crushing kicks, even his tail a weapon of pure force. Meanwhile, Kion cut through foes with precision, disabling each enemy in his path. Together, they were a storm, unstoppable, unshakable, a perfect team forged in chaos. One enemy snapped, unable to stomach the sight of that savage kangaroo, and lunged in blind rage. But Kenzu countered faster, landing a devastating strike that sent the fool crashing into the far wall like a rag doll. Kion, Michael, but the mistake was not finishing them in a single strike. That was his ace in the hole. His slaves rose again, overflowing with twisted strength. They came back swinging harder and deadlier than before. Even in the hell that was the tower, Kion kept his composure, refusing to lose himself. This new battle hit harder than the last, draining every ounce of stamina from the squad, and it showed. How the hell could they fight like this non-stop? Kion saw no healers, no regeneration. Somehow, Michael was juicing their experience to insane levels. What kind of sick trick was this? The truth cut deep. The commander was fueling them by burning through their very life force. He reveled in it, flexing that in this state, every one of their stats doubled. The psycho was actually enjoying the carnage like it was his personal stage show. Kion realized the ugly truth. When Michael drained them dry, they'd collapse and die. His earlier words came back sharp. He treated his comrades like disposable trash. To Michael, nothing mattered but his own survival. He twisted the knife deeper, claiming even Kion wasn't clean if he'd climbed this far drenched in blood. Kion accepted that his hands were stained, but if there was a chance to save even one life, he'd take that road. Because that's what it meant to still be human, to keep some shred of compassion alive. That was why he didn't want to slaughter them all. But if he didn't end this, his friends were doomed. His mind had to stay ice cold, every emotion locked away, because his priority was saving his squad. Michael sensed the difference in him, recognizing Kion as someone special, and activated absolute sense. It let him slip through every strike, even disarming opponents with brutal precision. But Kion wasn't after the puppets, he aimed straight for the puppeteer. And while Michael never saw it coming, Kion delivered the killing blow. The commander's final breath admitted it. Facing a monster like this, even off the record, was twisted luck. He confessed his allies were nothing but pawns on his board. Maybe in his dying haze he regretted it. Maybe he thought about repentance, but it was too damn late. Kaiyan and Kenzu stood victorious, absorbing fragments of the fallen enemy's power. The mission in that zone was complete, with most contenders erased from the game. No player had expected the sudden warp back into the lobby. Kaiyan felt a rush of relief. Once again, his crew made it back alive and intact. But his attention was locked on someone else, more intriguing than the rest of the players. She sat apart as always, distant, untouchable, not sparing a glance at anyone. The hero carried the weight of guilt, apologizing for the way he judged her without knowing the truth. Kayla, true to her style, brushed it off with her usual cold routine, acting like it was never about them. The moment he tried to tease her into admitting otherwise, she flashed steel, and he knew he was pushing his luck. That was his cue to step back. Still, the question burned. Why had she chosen the path of a thief? Maybe her past carved her into this shape. Maybe tragedy shoved her here. Or maybe no one would ever know. The loudspeaker cut through the silence, announcing the mission's end and the approach of the 8th floor trial. Everything moved at breakneck speed. One battle barely closed, and another was already pulling them in. Kaiyan realized this was only the opening act of something far bigger. His stats ticked upward, boosted by the fight against high-level foes. But the truth stung. He had barely scraped past that victory with everything he had. Without real strength, his promises to protect his friends were just words, empty until he could back them up. The 8th floor was revealed as a qualification arena, a proving ground for the worthy. The squad tightened their resolve, ready to grind harder, sharpen sharper, grow stronger with every trial. Players found themselves in a new lobby, but this time, they weren't alone. Gladiators stood among them, warriors radiating menace like they owned the floor. Not all were elite, but some carried an aura that screamed danger. Then something began materializing before them. Everyone tensed, weapons at the ready, bracing for a threat. A chilling screen flickered alive, revealing a silhouette they all recognized. Kum Kum. Yes, a rabbit again, but this wasn't the cute trickster they remembered. It introduced itself as a middle manager of the Tower of the End. The name was Kim Kim. Seriously? Who the hell came up with these names? The rabbit warned against ignoring him. Obedience and attention were survival here. This arena was the qualification stage, where gladiators gathered and only those who cleared the mission could ascend. Failure, as always, meant the tower's iron law, death. Phase 1 dropped instantly. Form a squad of 4 and hunt down Jagam mammoths. 8 beasts total, 2 hours on the clock. Fail, and the price was obvious. Death. As always, the moment the rules landed, questions started flying through the players' minds. Someone pointed out the math didn't add up, questioning the rabbit's design. Kim Kim acted like the question itself was trash, as if they hadn't realized this wasn't some damn vacation. Maybe they were just ignoring him, but if that was the case, pain was coming for them all. Still, since this was only the first phase, he tossed in a little bonus condition. It was no gift. Killing another player would count the same as slaying a beast. Most froze with terror at the thought, clutching at their lives, but a few twisted smiles showed some were hyped by it. The portal cracked open, players rushing either to dive in or scramble to piece together their squads. Then one guy from the opposite side snagged everyone's attention with a bold announcement. What he asked wasn't just unexpected, it was straight up shocking. The blonde wanted to know if there were any killers here. His name was Parker, and he himself was one. But why hunt for others like him? What game was he playing? Regular players had no clue what killers really were, or what their purpose was in the tower. But no one lingered on it too long. Time was bleeding away, and the monster count was way too low for everyone. A squad of armed diehards dashed forward, not caring about the odds, just charging head first. Nobody, not even Kayla, seemed willing to team up with Parker. By chance, a party fell into place. Liam, Kaiyan, Parker, and a mysterious girl none of them knew. The squad was stacked, the main hero with his blade, a deadly killer, and the wildcard girl whose power was still a mystery. As they hunted, Kaiyan's guide lit up with data on a hidden objective. Pulling up his minimap, he spotted the leader of the Jagham mammoths sealed under a barrier in the northeast. That was massive. If they bagged this beast, nobody else had to die. Following Kaiyan's route, they finally laid eyes on the giant mammoth caged beneath a dome of light. Parker admitted he hadn't expected Kyan's lead to actually pan out. Liam finally dropped the act, admitting Kyan wasn't a guy you could judge by level. He was on another tier. The killer wasn't impressed, saying the swordsman was overselling it, like the hero didn't match the hype. Something was seriously off about Parker. Why the hell had he triggered his assassin's eyes, scanning the others like prey? Kyan had always been the one observing, but this time, the weight of being watched pressed down on him hard. Before they could take the mammoth down, the barrier had to fall, but normal strikes barely scratched it. Kyan reasoned it would probably drop on its own after some time. In truth, his guide revealed the barrier would only vanish once 5 mammoths were slain. 4 had already been taken down. But then, something truly horrifying and unforgivable erupted before their eyes. But deep down, he relished every second of it, especially the twisted horror painted across Kyan's and Liam's faces. What the hell was running through his mind? Why murder her? She hadn't even done a damn thing. To him, it was just insurance, proof that the portal would open. Rage boiled inside Liam, disgusted that this psycho butchered a teammate just to test a theory. Kyan already knew killers were unpredictable wildcards, and he had braced for chaos, but this went way beyond anything he imagined. He had dropped his guard the moment the secret mammoth was revealed, letting excitement cloud his focus. Now Parker grinned at the thought of wiping them all out, cashing in the rewards alone. Liam snapped, lunging at the blonde, unable to listen to another word from the madman. Parker was ready, blade flashing free, almost thrilled that things had escalated to bloodshed. But then the protagonist cut in, his counterattack burning hotter than Liam's fury. Kyan's aura blazed, 10 times Liam's rage, sharpened into the will to crush this smug butcher. He screamed at Liam to back off, sensing the danger was spiraling out of control. In an instant, Parker's blade swerved, piercing not the hero, but Liam, standing right behind him. Impossible. This man had no soul, no conscience, only bloodlust, pure and unchained. Liam's body crumpled to the ground, his breath shallow, life slipping away. Kyan staggered under the weight of it. He had been growing, getting stronger, but when it mattered, he still failed to protect his one true friend. The moment mirrored his past failures, the scars he swore he'd never repeat. Parker twisted the knife, taunting him, feeding the flames of his rage. Kyan felt nothing but raw fury, a singular drive to obliterate this arrogant killer. And right then, the barrier shattered, the mammoth's cage dissolving. Fate had thrown all 3 into the pit. The hero, the psychopath, and the monstrous boss. The beast's trunk swung like a wrecking ball, every hit capable of ending lives in an instant. Kyan barely managed to drag Liam clear, ripping him out of the monster's path before it finished him. He carried his fallen ally to what little cover he could find, shielding him from both the killer and the beast. Relief hit. Liam was still breathing, faint and uneven, but alive. His comrade's strength was undeniable. He had endured wounds that would have killed anyone else. Watching Parker fight, Kyan couldn't help but feel a flicker of envy. Only a savage could find joy in this carnage. Parker wasn't just unhinged, he was a monster in human skin. His power dwarfed Kyan's, maybe by too much. But what set him apart was his exclusive skill. His blade itself radiated an aura, a killing edge that seemed alive. Parker's blade was already deadly, but the real nightmare was the aura, moving separate from the steel, striking from angles no one could predict. Kyan burned to end him right there, but he knew the truth. If he rushed in now, he'd get shredded. First things first, the mammoth boss. 15 minutes left on the clock, no room for mistakes. And in the process, he'd dissect every single move the blonde psycho made. The hero cut down the mammoth, earning not just victory but a reward that pushed his limits higher. Parker didn't find the killer he sought, but he uncovered something far more intriguing, Kyan himself. Riding high on his spoils, Parker decided to let the kid live, just because he was in a good mood. That arrogance was too much. Kyan couldn't hold it back and demanded to know why Parker had chosen the path of a murderer. The blonde was stunned that a low-level scrub even knew about such a path. Meanwhile, most of the players warped back to the lobby, cheering that they'd survived another run. Liam returned with Kyan, gratitude heavy in his eyes. Once again, his life had been saved. Yet deep down, they knew. If it weren't for that killer's madness, their squad would still be whole. Kyan couldn't shake the earlier words about Parker's so-called killer's path. With every exchange, Parker's interest in him only grew sharper. Kyan laid his terms. He'd reveal how he knew about killers, but Parker had to answer every question in return. Parker agreed, but only if Kyan's info was worth his time. So, Kyan baited the hook, saying his own zone had a killer wielding something unique, a gun. He called her Kayla, the king of killers, though he hid her true identity. She was the only one carrying a firearm. Was that even a real title? Maybe not. But as bait, it was damn good. All that mattered was if Parker swallowed it. And he did. The blonde immediately wanted to know who this so-called king really was, proof he'd taken the hook. Kyan fired back with his own question. Why did Parker hunt other killers, and what was his true goal? Gripping the cursed blade had been a mistake. Even with the portal healing some wounds, his hands still throbbed, but pain brought answers. On the day, Parker already had a rough idea when that day would come. To seize it, he'd need alliances, with other bloodthirsty monsters like him. Ever since Kayla marked Kyan as her prime target, that day of blood haunted him constantly. Did she, the same Kayla who sometimes showed glimpses of humanity, harbor bloodlust as savage as Parker's? Now that Kyan understood the blonde's mission, he couldn't let him slip away. He swore he'd settle it with Parker right here on this floor, no matter the cost, even if it meant going all in. Suddenly, Kim Kim's face flashed across the screen. Kim Kim's eyes locked on Kyan, checking if he was really the one who uncovered the hidden mammoth. The rabbit announced a new twist. Volunteers would now be accepted for hunting down other players. Of course, first come, first served. The only question was, who'd be the first brave or stupid souls to step up? Kim Kim pointed out that too many players had survived since the last mission, thanks to someone finding that secret mammoth. At least 4 lives were supposed to be lost, but the head count showed way more survivors than expected. Confused players demanded to know how this tied into killing each other. Slowly, the ugly truth set in. Every mission had a minimum kill count. If those 4 didn't die, the next stage wouldn't even unlock. Sure, Kim Kim could have done it himself, but where was the fun in that? He dangled a bloody incentive, special rewards for killing other players, urging them to hunt the easy prey. The rabbit clearly wanted a massacre to thin the herd, but then what was the point of that hidden monster? A cocky player from another team spat out that Kim Kim was just messing around, itching to watch them tear each other apart. Even when others begged him to stop provoking the creature, he ignored them and kept pushing. He mocked that despite all of Kim Kim's past threats, the rabbit had never actually touched them, forgetting what happened with Kayla. The guide had warned Kyan never to provoke Kim Kim. If you crossed that line, payback was guaranteed. But the idiot didn't stop. Wasn't the rabbit's job just to explain the mission? He never should have opened his mouth. Talking to Kim Kim at all was a fatal mistake. A flash of violence tore through his shoulder, blood spraying everywhere. No one stayed safe after pissing off the tiny manager. Kim Kim made it crystal clear. Ignore him again, and things would get worse. Just because he hid behind a screen didn't mean he couldn't reach them. No one in the tower was untouchable. This was the Apocalypse Tower. Mercy was never part of the deal. Kim Kim gave them one last choice. Either he picked someone to die, or they did it themselves. At that moment, 2 hands rose, Kyan and Parker. Maybe this was Kyan's shot to take down true evil. The system triggered a special mission, warping them into an empty arena, standing face to face. If this was to be a duel, then the hero had to end the killer here and now. Parker hadn't planned on killing Kyan, so the kid stepping up as his opponent caught him completely off guard. Could Kyan really handle him? Parker, on the other hand, was itching for entertainment. Kyan knew better than to judge enemies by kill counts alone. That statement made Parker wonder how a rookie like him knew about the killer's eyes. But Kyan was certain. There were countless paths to power in this place, not just the psychotic one. Still, the harsh truth was clear. The psychopath standing before him was stronger than the hero, at least for now. When their blades finally clashed, the force of it shook the air, heavy and raw, like the world itself was holding its breath. Kyan could only block, his arms screaming under the pressure, with no opening to strike back. Parker's advantage was overwhelming. Every hit was brutal, every move too damn sharp. The killer's cocky aura made it clear. Kyan's earlier words about strength meant nothing against this reality. As Kyan staggered from the first exchanges, Parker just stood there, waiting for more fun. To him, the fight was nothing but a game. Deep down, Kyan knew what he had wasn't enough, but he wasn't walking in empty. He had an ace hidden up his sleeve. He wasn't alone. Beside him was his loyal partner, his wild little beast, Kenzu. Using pure surprise, Kenzu slammed in a clean hit, rocking the psycho off balance. Still, the bastard held strong. Of course he did. Who the hell would have expected a kangaroo to come charging out of nowhere? The duel turned real messy for Parker. 2-on-1 wasn't his idea of fun anymore. After Kyan's blade cut him, Parker realized he wasn't as untouchable as he thought. He mocked the fairness of summoning a familiar. But wasn't this almighty killer supposed to crush anyone anyway? Numbers didn't matter to him. Even if there were 10 enemies, he'd still dream of slitting every throat. Parker unleashed full power, but Kyan had spotted something back during the mammoth hunt. A crack in the killer's armor. His fang aura was monstrous, sure, but it drained mana like a busted tank. Furious after Kensu's strike, Parker went berserk, burning through his energy at max speed. That rage meant his mana pool was about to tank fast. But here was the real nightmare. His attacks were damn near impossible to predict. Kyan's saving grace was his absolute sense. Once activated, he could barely slip past those chaotic strikes. If he and Kenzu could stall long enough until Parker's mana hit 0, Kyan had a trump card ready. That would be their one real shot at victory. It was a risky plan, but in his mind, they were the ones walking out alive. Still, he himself couldn't land a killing blow, but with Kenzu creating openings, the target list grew bigger. Yet as Parker's mana dropped to its final embers, Kyan and Kenzu charged in, betting everything on one last strike. Together, they triggered their unique powers, Kenzu unleashing his brutal smash, Kyan channeling the art of a mid-tier swordsman. But at the crucial second, their timing broke. They tangled, blocking each other instead of landing the kill. Parker seized the opening like a true monster, burning the last of his mana to deliver a devastating fatal strike. Kenzu, the boy's loyal beast, threw himself in front of his master, taking the fatal blow so Kyan could keep breathing. His sacrifice was pure heroism. His beloved kangaroo was gone. Was this really the world he was stuck living in? Parker didn't stop swinging. Now he struck with words, mocking if Kyan had any more tricks left. Kaijian once claimed there were countless ways to grow stronger without killing, but even Parker had to admit, he'd been caught off guard. The blonde monster sneered that Kyan had leaned entirely on his pet, and now he was nothing but a broken figure on his knees. But to Kyan, Kenzu wasn't just a pet. Kenzu gave his life so his master could keep fighting. Parker expected him to spit out some tired line about friendship, about Kenzu being more than just a kangaroo. In his twisted view, the more someone cared, the weaker they became. Easier to stab, easier to break. Maybe it sounded cliché, but laughing together, fighting side by side, living in peace, that was what made people human. Kayan knew Parker's bloody road only led to emptiness and loneliness. But the psycho rejected it all. Words were useless to him, nothing but noise. At the edge of death, he found it amusing watching Kyan cling desperately to what scraps of humanity he had left. Parker kept stabbing with words, spitting that Kenzu had been just an animal he crushed in one strike. But Kyan understood the truth. Thanks to Kenzu, he was still alive, and Parker's mana was bone dry. The killer lunged, aiming to finish Kyan the same way he'd killed his friend. But this time, the hero countered, unlocking the second tier of the intermediate swordsman. From Kyan's blade surged a new, unknown force, something called release. It wiped Parker clean out of existence, like he'd never even set foot in that hall. Kyan didn't just beat his opponent, he erased him completely. No wound, no corpse, nothing left. In that moment, he gained his second level as an intermediate swordsman, along with the ability to wield release. But it drained nearly all his mana. It was a weapon to use with deadly caution. Its power was insane, and only then did Kichan realize he'd truly taken down the killer. Yet the cost was terrifying. In his heart, he whispered an apology to Kenzu and a thank you. Suddenly, a notification appeared. His fallen beast would return in one day. Could Kenzu really resurrect? After the battle ended, a screen lit up before Kyan, showing Kim Kim's face. The Overseer admitted the finale had been unexpected, and praised Kaijian with a twisted kind of respect. But there was no time to relax. With the killer gone, missions would only grow harder. The assassins were among the tower's strongest elites, but also part of its difficulty scale. Now that one had fallen, the challenges ahead would be merciless. A sharp dissonance hit Kyan. Fewer killers meant the climb to the top would only get rougher. If those beasts aren't stopped, it's game over. Straight up apocalypse, rivers of blood, mountains of corpses. So, What's our boy supposed to do in a mess like this? Either way, he wrapped up the mission and Kim Kim kicked him forward with a new quest and a shiny reward. The dude dropped into a fresh location, right in front of some weird structure that looked like a giant hourglass. For him, the vibe was too familiar, like something ripped straight out of a comic. When he glanced to the side, he spotted someone. Could this figure actually be the reward? The new mission was simple on paper: hit a certain level in training before the last grain of sand ran out. But there were zero details. Everything felt foggy and uncertain. And what the hell was this certain level anyway? At least he got lucky for once. No rivals to fight, no bloodshed this time. Kim Kim almost tossed him a random skill box, but for bagging the Demon Kill achievement, he scored a special reward. Now, Kane demanded to know who this geezer was. Turns out, the guy was a celestial demon, destined to be Kane's master. It reminded Kane of those martial arts webtoons he had read, though this felt heavier, more intense. The man looked more like a Shaolin monk than some sky demon. And out of nowhere, while Kane was lost in thought, he got cracked on the head by a plain wooden stick. The tiny old man smacked him for his wicked thoughts. Worse, he could read minds. That was next level crazy. The strike was obvious as hell, but Kane still couldn't dodge it. The demon pegged Kane's level as total trash and lined up another strike. This time, Kane was supposed to block. Kane was convinced the last time, he just spaced out. And now, he'd blow the old man's mind with his skills. He even activated his absolute sense. But even that wasn't enough. The stick smacked him in the exact same spot. The demon admitted Kane had boosted his perception and sensitivity, but his body couldn't keep up. How? His agility was maxed out. But the old man explained it wasn't just about raw speed. Then the demon told him to attack. Kane had a blade, the old man only a stick. What chance could he possibly have? Kane stopped holding back and peeked at his status window. Nothing. The old man had no info at all. Even if he could only use it once, Kane decided to go all out. He fired up the second level of intermediate swordsmanship. On top of that, he unleashed his new ability, Release. But the old man wasn't bluffing. He had every right to call himself a celestial demon, because he split Kane's strike clean in two, like Moses parting the sea. With nothing but that damn stick, the old man proved his point. Kane's level was straight up garbage. Weapon or magic techniques didn't crown him the god of warriors. To even touch the knowledge of true martial arts, the first step was stripping away every shred of magical tech in his body. Kane thought the geezer had lost his mind. Magic was survival. 101 in the Tower of the End. Without that power, Kane would have been dead 100 missions ago. There was no way he'd just toss it aside. But every mission threw something new at him. And this time, the path forward demanded the exact opposite of everything he'd done before. The sands had already started running, fast as hell. Restarting from scratch felt like suicide. He was already a mid-tier swordsman. Why the hell should he abandon it all just because some ancient demon told him to? The old man could see the battle raging inside him, but made it clear he wouldn't force his hand. The choice most would kill just to hear a single word from this guy, but Kane was on the verge of throwing it all away. Deep down, though, he'd always felt it. Stats and skills alone had limits. So, he drove his sword into the ground, a gesture that screamed his decision to become the man's disciple. Dropping to his knees, he surrendered to the path of his new master. Shockingly, even after his skills were stripped away, Kane managed to reclaim all his former levels. From the moment he chose the path of the student, he became stronger, because he conquered himself. Time blurred. Who knew how much had passed? But Kane was dead sure he'd surpass every past version of himself before the last grain of sand dropped. The demon stepped forward and ruffled his hair, acknowledging the kid for outgrowing who he once was. Just as Kane soaked in the praise, the old man cut him down again, reminding him he was still trash tier. Yet, deep inside, the demon knew the kid's potential ran way deeper than he first thought. Maybe that's when the demon laid it down. From this point forward, they were officially master and student. Respect was mandatory. Only now? Before this, what were they? An errand boy and some cranky old fart. The master revealed the path he'd teach, the art of the sword, refined through the unique technique of a celestial demon. The ultimate swordsmanship across all eras, the shadowless phantom blade. His story began the day the world hailed him as the greatest prodigy in the history of martial arts. Before he even hit 29, he had unified the 7 branches of the Cheonma cult and seized the throne of the heavenly Cheonma. People already whispered that the greatest Cheonma of all ages had arrived. He then dedicated his entire existence to the sword, becoming one with the blade, ascending until he found himself in this very tower. Only when he landed in this place did he realize it was the end of his road. Cain thought he'd been trapped here against his will. Truth was, the old man had cut a deal with the tower. He had a role to play, but he could dip back into his world whenever he damn well pleased. By that logic, didn't that mean everyone here was basically an NPC? Because of the pact, the master couldn't spill any more details. Still, he swore Cain would master a sword art of unseen power, a blade that hunted the soul without leaving a shadow. Cain locked in, promising himself he'd grind until it became reality. The master didn't expect such a chill, stone-faced reaction. Any disciple from a cult would have lost their damn mind with joy. Cain didn't even know a technique like this existed. And the master laid it down. From now on, Cain had to train relentless and stay ready for anything. He stripped away his old sword skill, but rebuilding his past level wasn't too tough if he walked the same road again. But the shadowless phantom blade? That wasn't just another skill grind. It was slow and fast, calm and deadly, soft yet devastating, pure insanity to pull off. The master declared that even as a genius of all time, he had honed this one art for his entire life. Cain admitted that ever since starting this path, he only felt weaker and clumsier. That's when the old man wrapped up his meditation. And, without warning, called him into a duel. Cain had just confessed he couldn't land a hit, and now he was supposed to spar the monster himself? The kid had barely scraped by against his own clone. What chance did he have against his master? But the hourglass kept bleeding sand, and there was no time for excuses. His hand gripped the hilt. He launched a strike, lightning fast, but the master slid out of the way just as easily. Again and again, Cain kept swinging, only grinding himself down. The old man's movements were so ghost-like, the kid couldn't even track them. When the master finally raised his stick to smack him across the head again, Cain set himself to block it and counter with everything he had. But even after predicting it perfectly, he still got cracked on the skull. Why couldn't he stop it? The old man reminded him that blind instinct could never surpass true sword mastery. Maybe before it worked, with lucky dodges and last-second shifts. But against him, such instincts could be tricked and shattered with ease. Cain's mind spun out. The sand was running low, thoughts piling up in his head like a storm. Was this technique even worth chasing? What if time simply ran out before he got it? Reading the kid's thoughts, the master pushed him to feel the texture itself. A new world cracked open before Cain's eyes, a parallel realm blazing bright, nothing like the ordinary one he knew. The master slipped into serenity, fusing with that realm, guiding Cain to sense the texture woven through both matter and spirit. Everything that exists or doesn't carried its own unique texture. If Cain could lock onto it, he'd hold the power to slice through anything. That's when it clicked. The sword that stalks the soul without shadow, the shadowless phantom blade. A weapon sharp enough to shred even the immaterial. Calm yet overwhelming, gentle yet unbreakable. And finally, the hero tapped into it. He felt the texture. This time, the master struck first, but Cain didn't just see a stick coming at him. And in his own grip wasn't some store-bought blade anymore. Cain lashed back with his counter. That sinister staff split in half. The kid had cut straight through it. He felt the texture, cut into the intangible. Pride flickered in the master's eyes. His student had broken through. And awe burned in Cain's gaze, seeing with his own eyes the true blade that hunted the soul without shadow. He had walked the path toward forging the sword's way, but not every soul got to glimpse its essence. The master revealed the secret. The shadow-hunting sword wasn't about what you filled it with, but what you emptied away. True mastery only came at the edge, when everything unnecessary was stripped bare. Cain admitted he could never have reached that level on his own, always chasing quick gains, hungering for flashier tricks. It was wrong time for that thought. He'd forgotten about the master's telepathy. Dropping to his knees, he thanked the master once more, swearing to etch these teachings into his soul and climb to the tower's peak. Raising his head, he saw no master, only a folded set of clothes before him. Cain froze, then heard the heavenly Cheonma explain that a disciple of his shouldn't be walking around like a beggar. As a final vow, he promised they would meet again, somewhere along the path to the tower's end of the world. With that, Cain's mission was marked complete, and his body was warped into another place. But it wasn't the familiar lobby, nor the gladiator's waiting hall. The spot before him was something entirely unknown. He felt the presence behind him, sharp and hostile, no doubt an enemy lurking in the shadows. Seated there was the mid-floor manager, Kim Kim, the rabbit with eyes that hid no kindness. Kane realized he'd been dragged into the creature's personal chamber, the very one he'd glimpsed on a monitor. Why here of all places? Turns out, Kim Kim had an offer lined up for him. The rabbit reminded him of their last talk. The killer Parker was dead, leaving a slot wide open, and Kane was expected to claim it. The kid's first instinct was to refuse outright. Technically, by the tower's rules, Kim Kim couldn't force anyone's hand. But no one dared imagine what might happen if he lost his temper. Defying him wasn't just reckless, it was suicide. So the rules said no coercion, but intimidation, threats. That was his playground. If Kane accepted, everything he'd built so far would collapse into ashes, leaving only brute force as his path forward. And at his current level, he couldn't even fathom the true essence of Kim Kim's power. Trapped in a dead end, he wrestled with the question, what path was the right one now? But he still had his guidebook, his hidden cheat sheet. That was where he turned for answers. It said once the gladiator mission wrapped up, he'd be tossed back to the start of the 8th floor trial, the beast tamer's domain. The tower never stopped pulling tricks, but how did that tie into this moment? Simple. Once he reset to that point, Parker would still be alive. With that knowledge, Kane chose to accept Kim Kim's cursed offer. He stepped onto the very path he once despised. From now on, his title was Assassin. The decision lit a cruel satisfaction across the rabbit's face. As the assassin's mark settled on him, Kane's stats surged. Strength, speed, endurance, every metric skyrocketed. Then the system whispered that his blade skill had fused with a blade aura, yet his master had stripped that away. Suddenly, the system glitched, breaking in ways it never had before. Instead, it granted him an alternate weapon and new skills. Energy rampaged inside him, twisting and reshaping his core like molten steel in a forge. When the teleport hit, he landed back in the gladiator waiting hall, greeted warmly by his brother-in-arms, Liam. But the shift in Kane's vibe was impossible to miss. Liam spotted it instantly. Even the changes in his appearance drew comments. He now wore the fresh attire gifted by his master, thankfully not a copy of the heavenly Cheonma's own robes. It wasn't just stylish, the outfit carried enchantments, repairing itself every time it was damaged. Yet in the massive hall, there were only a handful of survivors. Was this truly all that remained? And then, as if summoned by the tension, a screen flared to life. Kim Kim's face filled it. Kim Kim laid it out. This last mission would be harsher than anything before. Nobody knew how many would crawl out alive this time. With a snap of his fingers, he cursed them to suffer in agony until the bitter end. Out of nowhere, monsters materialized. Lion-shaped, but way darker, dripping with malice. The arena filled with roaring crowds hungry for death and blood, like some twisted throwback to Rome's gladiator pits. The task was simple on paper. Slay the Iron Lion. Victory meant a gladiator rank up. Failure meant death. This place, the stage of their final mission, was no ordinary battlefield. It was known as the Gladiator's Graveyard. It didn't sound impossible, except each Iron Lion radiated an aura as heavy as that mammoth they'd barely taken down 4-on-1. One gladiator, Simon, stood ready to die here, blade in hand, pride carved across his face. He lunged to strike one of the beasts, already accepting his death. But a sudden blow from behind snuffed him out instantly. The crowd had come for gladiator blood, not monster corpses, and the twist sent shockwaves through them. Standing there, gun in hand, was Kane, staring at his own weapon like he couldn't believe it either. But the shock faded fast, replaced with pure exhilaration. The rush was unlike anything he'd ever felt. With the mission cleared in gladiator mode, Kane was supposed to return to the lobby. But, just as expected, the system glitched, yanking him straight back to the start of the 8th floor mission. He found himself in the Beast Tamer waiting hall. Time itself rewound. A quick status check confirmed it. Every assassin buff was gone. Parker's revival had reclaimed the killer's seat, and everything snapped back into place. Yet the weapon still sat in Kane's inventory, useless without sniper skills to back it up. Then he remembered, defeating Michael should have let him inherit part of the man's abilities. Sure enough, he unlocked entry-level telepathy, able to send thoughts to up to 5 allies. He immediately reached out to Liam, dropping a mental warning about Parker. After all, Liam would be facing the gladiator trial with the mammoths solo this time. Maybe Kane exaggerated the danger a bit, but the warning gave Liam the edge he needed to survive. The hero braced himself and summoned Kenzu. Even knowing the creature would come back, his heart still pounded with nerves. The little kangaroo appeared without delay, bounding before his master. Their reunion hit hard, a burst of raw joy. Kenzu, though, looked confused at why his human was so emotional. Then a man approached, face painted with unnatural kindness, claiming he couldn't understand how the beast was still alive. From the jump, he marked Kenzu as prey, his two-headed Doberman, Kelve, already itching to tear into him. A glowing screen lit up before the players, Kim Kim's face plastered across it, announcing the start of the 8th floor mission. The hero barely cared to listen, but the moment that man cast his gaze at Kenzu, it lit a fire in his chest. The rules were clear: win the duel of familiars and level up as a beast tamer, or lose and get tossed into the next mission. The rabbit clarified: failures could still advance if they survived, since too few players remained for stricter rules. The duel began, and the tension hit like static in the air, sharp and unshakable. His opponent stepped forward, the brunette with the two-headed monster, Kelve. Shock rippled through him when Kenzu morphed from a tiny critter into a full-blown battle kangaroo. The transformation hit like a thunderclap, making it clear this beast was way tougher than expected. The rival snapped his command, unleashing Kelve straight at Kenzu. The beast was colossal, its jagged fangs gleaming, frothing with rage and thirst for blood. Yet the hero and Kenzu moved as one, dodging the strike with fluid precision. Kelve's strength and speed were savage, its unpredictability doubled by the chaos of two snarling heads. But cracks started showing, not in the monster, but in its tamer. With the right bond, a beast could rival a warrior in raw might. But when all focus went into the pet, the master's own combat power stayed embarrassingly weak. And that left a leash on the beast itself, forced to protect a fragile human behind it. This explained why tamers were rare, but none had ever bonded like Kane and Kenzu. This was more than a clash of monsters. It was a trial of masters, souls on the line. The opponent couldn't fathom how a beast tamer fought with a blade like a pro. He snapped out the kill order, desperate to end it fast. But when Kelve lunged, Kane and Kenzu split apart, forcing the beast into confusion. 2 heads, but 1 body. Its speed was brutal, but tricking 2 brains into missteps was easier than it looked. As Kelve's fury boiled over, the time came to strike back. Kane had once attacked without rhythm, out of sync with Kenzu, but now he felt the connection spark alive. The kangaroo's strike and his sword carved the battlefield into a flawless line of death. Through this mission, he gained a phantom blade, a weapon that cut without shadow. From this point, boy and beast would no longer be just partners. They'd be legends in the making. Together, they crushed the duel, mission cleared, returning to the lobby where their allies awaited. Seeing the others again, he thought nothing could shake him now. But Liam blindsided him, asking straight up about the assassins. Those who survived updated their ranks, lifting the hero's spirits just a bit. Liam admitted they lived only thanks to Kane's telepathy. The others sulked, annoyed he had tested it only on the swordsman. Off to the side, Kayla stood alone, surprisingly grim. Not everyone had made it back. Missions were only getting deadlier. The assassin question lingered, spreading unease among the survivors. Kane had to spin the truth into something that would shut down more questions. Thinking it through, he realized how dangerous Parker really was. Even Kayla didn't know what he knew. With the 9th floor mission looming, he crafted his answer. He declared that assassins were the ones pulling strings, twisting the tower's difficulty itself. The loudspeakers blared, 1 hour until the 9th floor transport. Time to train. Everyone dove into practice, sharpening their skills for survival. Kane, too, mastering the shadowless soul-hunting blade, demanded no slacking. During training, Kayla approached him, insisting on a private talk. She'd taken the bait. Back when he was an assassin, Kane had dug up secrets about the Day of Blood. On the 9th floor, a vote would decide if it would happen. Majority yes, and the 10th would host it. After their domains merged, Kayla's weapon use weakened, making her a likely supporter of that vote. No, more than likely, she'd crave it. His mission was to seed doubt. He hit her with the bomb. He knew who she was. Assassin Kayla. The revelation cracked her composure. Then he dropped a second bomb, brandishing his gun. He was an assassin too. She doubted him, but it explained his arsenal of bizarre powers. Activating her assassin's eye, she read his kill count. Only 5. Her faith wavered. Kane twisted it, warning not to trust the eye completely. She folded under his words, believing him. Leveling her weapon, she demanded to know how he had uncovered her secret when she'd left no trail. He claimed his vision pierced everything: stats, class, mana, skills, even gold. She snapped back that it was impossible. He moved to prove her wrong. He rattled off her mana count, her potential, her limits. He kept going, merciless, until she cut him off herself. His trap was sprung. She'd now think twice before voting reckless. Assassins suffered heavy penalties for killing one of their own, after all. She asked one final question, and Kane braced himself to twist any answer in his favor. But what came out blindsided him. She asked if he was the great assassin. The phrase froze him. What the hell did that even mean? The loudspeakers saved him, announcing the 9th floor mission start. Kane was ripped into a bleak new arena, a graveyard, silent and cursed. He stood alone. The mission was solo.